Alex Ferrario. Cardinals with the victory last night against the Padres, 4-3 in walk-off fashion, thanks to Nolan Arenado, T-Bone. Everybody's favorite, Nolan Arenado, coming through as hero for the Cardinals. That gives them a chance to split the series against the Padres. It is BK and Ferrario today here on 101 ESPN. Per usual, it's a Thursday and a Friday, so BK's not working, and it's Labor Day weekend, so he's really not working. So we've got you covered until 2 o'clock today. Our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. You can also check us out on our YouTube cameras at 101 ESPN STL. Cameras brought to you by the Air Alliance team. Our graveyard chat off and running. But I don't want to talk about the offense to start off today, T-Bum. Despite their good win to come out on top, give them a chance to split with the Padres, I think the bigger storyline was the starting pitcher yesterday, and it was Andre Pallante. Andre Pallante, once again, gives the Cardinals a really solid chance to win when he takes them out. 5 2/3, so he's not getting the quality start. Gives up 8 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, has only 3 strikeouts, but that is just a string of very solid starts by Andre Pallante. In the previous 3 starts, 5 2/3 with 1 earned run, 7 innings pitched against the Dodgers, giving up 2 earned runs, 7 innings against the Minnesota Twins, giving up 1 earned run. And then, of course, you get that one yesterday, only giving up 2 earned runs. It's very evident that Andre Pallante has become not just a consistent starting pitcher for the Cardinals, but a reliable starting pitcher for the Cardinals. I think Ali Marmol told KMOX yesterday that he has been their best starting pitcher since post-All-Star break. And T-Bone put these numbers down. The playoff teams that he's gone up against since July 1st, 2 earned runs, 1 earned run, 2 earned runs, 1 earned run, 4 earned runs. In all of those games, he's given them 5 or more innings pitched. He's exactly what the Cardinals thought they were going to get from Miles Mikolas this season. Miles Mikolas was supposed to be the Robin to the Batman that was Sonny Gray. And it has not worked out. The hit to contact without the shift has hurt Miles Mikolas. And every time he takes the mound, you don't know if you're going to get 7 innings of 1 earned run or 3 innings of 8 earned runs. But with Andre Pallante, he's providing you the consistency every time he steps on the mound that Miles Mikolas had done in years past. And I think you're seeing the passing of the torch of Andre Pallante. He's not going to wow you with strikeout stuff. He's not going to go out there and give you 8-9 innings of consistent work. What he's going to do is every time he takes the mound, he is going to give you a chance to win and keep the runs low, which honestly is a necessity for this Cardinals team.
Yeah, and he's going to keep the ball on the ground, which is nice to see as well. Like when he gets beat, it's not like line drive missiles. It's like balls that mow the grass on the infield that end up getting into the outfield. You're right. I mean, he is the guy that looks like, and we'll see. We'll see what it looks like next year, and assuming that he's going to be starting in the rotation for the Cardinals next year. But he looks like the guy that will be kind of taking on the Miles Mikolas role. And the numbers against playoff teams, we talk about kind of that it factor, the clutch factor. We talk about all the time with the offense because they can't perform with runners in scoring position. It is nice to see Andre Pallante, a guy that I would have thought, early on when we first saw him get called up. He did have one start against a playoff team that I decided not to include in the numbers since. For one reason, it was, I think, his second start back up at the big league level. Yeah, and that was against Houston, and he got roughed up a little bit in that game.
And prior to that, against Cincinnati, he gave them an elite start, 6 innings of 0 earned runs.
It was early on, but since you look at the numbers since July, and these 5 playoff teams, these are legitimately good teams. Like that Padres lineup, I think the Padres are going to be, at minimum, playing in the NLCS this year. The Dodgers, they've got a loaded lineup as well. Twins are solid and the Royals are solid. He's got a 2.84 ERA. He's averaging 6 innings a start in these starts against the last 5 playoff teams he's gone against. And he's holding opponents to a 590 OPS. And he's got 22 strikeouts, which is pretty nice to see as well. This is what you want to see from a young starter for the St. Louis Cardinals. The moment doesn't look too big for him. He doesn't just pitch against bad teams and really put up numbers, which, there was a little bit of that to Zach Thompson down the stretch last year that we got all excited about. This feels legitimate. Now, he does allow a lot of hits at times, but you can live with them because they're not a bunch of damage. It's just a bunch of singles that end up rolling through into the outfield. It's impressive what Andre Pallante has become for the St. Louis Cardinals. I would argue he's, the second, maybe third best development from this season for St. Louis, up there with Wynn and Burleson.
Yeah, I would say that's probably spot on.
And it's because you just didn't have a cost control starter you really trusted.
Yeah.
And honestly, you didn't really think about him as a guy that could become that when the season started. Remember, he started in the bullpen, went down, and they're like, oh, he's the starter. We were all like, what?
You mean the Cardinals believed that a starting pitcher was just a bullpen pitcher?
Yeah, classic Cardinals.
Go the opposite direction, it works.
He's been impressive, and I love what you said about passing the torch from Mikolas to Pallante, because I could see that, and it made me think there's two kind of comps for me with Andre Pallante. One, a slightly better version of probably what Miles Mikolas was. And then the second one is, I think he reminds me a lot of Jake Westbrook. Cardinals fans remember Westbrook from that 2011 team.
Yeah.
He's got maybe a little bit more swing and miss than Jake Westbrook. But if I told you today that you could lock in over the next 4 seasons, which is the arbitration years for Andre Pallante, he averages 27 starts, 160 innings, and has a slightly above 4 ERA. Would you sign up for that?
Absolutely.
Or you can press your luck, but I don't know what the luck will bring.
I mean, you're pressing luck to hope to get like around the 3s, and I just think you're really living with a hopium in that perspective. And somebody texted in when I said that, T-Bone, on our Air Comfort Service text line saying, guys, Miles Mikolas is terrible. Miles Mikolas is bad now, but in 2019, 2023, a stretch of 4 years, Miles Mikolas was not terrible. Was he a number 2? You really had to squint to see it, but he was a perfectly capable starting pitcher that you would use in a playoff series, probably like in the middle of a 5 or 7 game series. Is he an ace? No. But like I just pulled up Jake Westbrook's numbers, because why not live in the past a little bit? I mean, Jake Westbrook, the year after the Cardinals won the World Series, 174 innings, a 3.9 ERA. Yeah. Like, if you're telling me right now that I could smash the button for the next 4 years, that I'm going to get Andre Pallante, who is going to give me 27 starts and be somewhere around a 4, to me, that is a perfectly capable number 4 in a rotation. And guess what? You don't have to pay $13 million for him like you did with Lance Lynn.
Yeah, that's the thing is, like, I say that. And, you know, some people may say press your luck. I say good luck with that. But
I only press my luck when I play whammy, guys.
Yeah, but I look at that and I say that's perfect because of what you just said there with the money that you have to pay guys like Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson. And look, Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn have done what was expected of them. They've posted. They've made starts.
Yep.
At times, Gibson has 8 innings for the Cardinals, but their ERAs are 4 and like 4.5.
Yeah, if you took Kyle Gibson's first half and just utilized it in the second half, we'd be talking about a different pitcher. The problem is he's got a history of wearing down in the second half, and that's why it hasn't worked.
And when it comes to those guys, they're making a combined, $25 million, I think is what it is.
Yeah, 13 and 12.
And for Pallante, like, as he goes through the arbitration system, like, year 4, he might kind of max out at like that $10 million.
Yeah.
Unless he has 1 year that is one of those that is kind of off the rails and pitches really well, then you would see that. And by the way, the reason we brought up Miles Mikolas, you mentioned the seasons for him. The average numbers I gave you were for the 4 seasons that he pitched in 2019, 21, 22, and 23. And the only reason that the 27 starts is a little lower because you got to remember in 2021 he was a little bit hurt, but since he's a pitcher, I said, you know, those guys break quite a bit. I said, let's just use that as the sample size.
Yeah.
And I would totally sign up for that because of the cost control that there is. And if you have the cost, you have to have cost control, in my opinion, in your rotation in 1 or 2 spots, whether it be in that 4 or 5 slots, so you don't have to go out and spend the $10, $15 million for a back end rotation arm, or if it's a legitimate young arm that comes up and can be an ace, so you don't have to go searching for those guys, because those guys are rare to find on the open market.
Yeah. And so watching Andre Pallante pitch, not just last night, I think last night was kind of just reassurance, but watching him pitch really since he was brought back up at the end of May, where he has posted a 3.1 ERA since May 29th for the Cardinals, which is just insane. I found myself get a little frustrated, T-Bone, because I watch Pallante and I'm like, man, the Cardinals fell into something really good for them right here. Now, who knows what next year looks like, 2 years from now looks like. Honestly, it could be a Dakota Hudson to where things just fall apart and you're thinking, well, that was fun for those 3 months that you had it.
It was a good time.
But it was. They had their ace in waiting. I'll never forget those. But let's go down the hypothetical path that he just continues this, that he is a competent and consistent starting pitcher for you. This is more of the reason why we should be seeing Michael McGreevy and Gordon Graceffo right now. There is no reason that the 40-man roster spots that might get utilized, which we'll talk about a little bit later, go to a Lance Lynn and a Steven Matz and bringing these guys back into your position. Michael McGreevy, the one game that he pitched, he posted for you 7 innings of work, giving up 1 earned run. Does that continue? I don't know. He's gone down to the minors and he's just stayed pretty consistent with that. it's frustrating when you see a guy like Andre Pallante have success and then think back and think, man, the Cardinals were literally going to send this guy back to Memphis before Lance Lynn injury popped up and let him keep posting. And now they realize what they've got. This is more of the reason why I get it. You won. You got a chance for the playoffs. Greg Amsinger's upset with all of us, Cardinals Nation. As much as you want to chase the playoffs, I think it's just as important to figure out who Michael McGreevy is and Gordon Graceffo is, who have pitched in Memphis for you. And watching Andre Pallante do what he has done this season, it's time to figure out what other starting pitchers you might have that you don't know you have.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's a tough spot. We talked a little bit about this yesterday of, the Cardinals are kind of stuck in between because they should, in theory, just place Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson on waivers. And maybe somebody claims them. And the reason I say waivers, if you put them on waivers, you can end up keeping them as well. Put them on waivers, see if somebody does take on the rest of their salary for the back part of this season. There's probably, I would think there would be a contender out there that could potentially need one of those guys. And if not,
especially maybe Lynn, who could be a bullpen piece.
Yeah, and maybe this is a long shot, but maybe there's a rebuilding team that says, you know what, maybe we should pick up a veteran. That way we don't have to, rely on young kids to pitch out because they're getting ready to hit their innings limits.
Right.
Like the Pittsburgh Pirates could potentially do that. I don't think they would, but that is another reason to potentially explore that. But you're right. It would be nice to at least see more of Michael McGreevy, more of Gordon Graceffo, see how these guys look here at the big league level, so you at least can look at the final month stretch and say, okay, do we want to keep this? Do we want to go into next season with these guys as a part of our rotation? Are they ready to be in the big leagues? Is it better for their development to remain another year in AAA? It would be nice to get those lessons kind of learned, and it reminds me of what they did with Zach Thompson last year. And Drew Rom, and as Michael Gershon told us on opening day, wasn't a big leaguer. But
Poor Drew.
The reason I mentioned those guys was because you got to see it for a final month. And you saw it with Drew Rom, and you said, okay, probably not ready for a guy that we can kind of slot into 1 through 5 in our rotation, but maybe a guy that can kind of be in the back part in the depth chart of like 7, 8, somewhere in that range. What you saw from Zach Thompson, we got excited about. Remember, we were like, okay, you can go into the season with him. And the Cardinals actually did the right thing and said, no, let's plan on him being the 6th guy for us. And then they had an injury come up in spring training, which was Sonny Gray, and he slots in rotation. Then we found out he actually wasn't ready to be a big league starter. But you got the information you needed in the year prior to at least think, okay, he could potentially be a guy that could be a depth piece for us. So that's why they should be trying to find a way to get a McGreevy and a Graceffo here, just so they can collect information on what those guys look like at the big league level.
2022, June 4th to July 31st. Do you know how many starts Andre Pallante made for the Cardinals?
Of this year?
No, 2022.
Oh, he made, I think, like 10.
10 starts, and he had a 4.1 ERA. He had 41 strikeouts, and he had 17 walks. Sounds like something that you're like, hey, we might have something here.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like the same guy you're seeing today.
He did not make a start in 2023. He became a bullpen arm for the Cardinals in 2023. And then he spent the beginning of this season in Memphis as a starter, and it took them all the way until May 29th to put him in a starting role for the Cardinals. He did not start a game from June of 2022 until May 29th of 2024, and he has been the exact same pitcher that he was in June of 2022. Do we really want to wait 2 more years to figure out what Michael McGreevy is when you could figure that out right now rather than use a Lynn or a Matz in this position? I say no for where the Cardinals are at right now, but what do I know?
Yeah, real quick to that, to your point there on those guys, I don't even know if you will come away with a big conclusion
Probably
of what
not.
those guys are, but at least you have an idea.
But at least you go into spring training next year saying he can compete for it rather than me go spend $13 million on an option of Gibson.
When we left last season, we all kind of agreed, like, if the Cardinals decided they wanted to go with Zach Thompson as the number 5 going into this year, at the time we would have said, okay, I can see why you would think that. If they, and again, I don't know what their plans are this offseason. They don't even know.
Matthew Liberatore is probably going to be a starter next year for all we know.
God, please don't let that be a thing.
Well, he's a lefty, and he's got all the hope, right?
Oh, no.
Just get used
terrible.
to it. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, little non-breaking news. I just had a brain fart here in this position. We've already had the lineup out. They believe the balloon party has already said it. Tommy Pham's not in the lineup. What does that mean for his future here in St. Louis? We'll discuss that and one guy that could have probably made this team a playoff team 3 months ago. We'll discuss all that next year on 101 ESPN. So if you haven't seen it, Bloom Party went through it earlier today, so we're not going to play the lineup game for you, but the lineup for the Cardinals is out for today's 1:15 start against the Padres. And Tommy Pham is not a part of it. Otherwise, it's a pretty similar lineup to what you had yesterday in the Cardinals win. Ivan Herrera is back in, Victor Scott is in, but Tommy Pham is not in. And it brings you to the position of what Jeff Jones tweeted out earlier today. Today is the last day for Major League Baseball teams to put a player on waivers in order for them to be claimed and eligible for the postseason. Jeff says, will be interesting to see if the Cardinals make that call on Tommy Pham, who has been fairly vocal about wanting a chance to be in the playoffs. Katie Woo has talked about this as well, about the role that Tommy Pham has been brought into the Cardinals with. Didn't expect to be a platoon bat, expected more to be an everyday starter, and expected to be a part of a team that's making their way to the playoffs. And right now, Tommy Pham's in position to be a part of a team that probably is going to finish below 500. So if you're the Cardinals and you go into today's game, and I do tinfoil theory this, I wonder why Tommy Pham's not in the lineup today for the Cardinals. Some of this could be that you want to get the other guys in. But T-Bone, I believe that plays into the decision that the Cardinals are going to make with Tommy Pham. I think he's going to be gone. Now, the whole process with waivers is if he doesn't get claimed, he still will be a part of your roster. But in that sense, I don't know if you can be upset if you're Tommy Pham because no playoff team wanted to claim you, and now you're back with the Cardinals and you try and make the push to be a playoff team. But other than that pinch hit grand slam by Tommy Pham, that was very fun that first day, I don't know if Tommy Pham has been exactly what the Cardinals were hoping he was going to be. He was supposed to be that platoon bat that was going to go in against left-handed pitchers and provide them power, provide them slug, provide them a spark. He's been okay. Defensively, he's played for you, but it hasn't been like you've been saving the outfield. In fact, they brought up Victor Scott because Tommy Pham couldn't play the center field position once Michael Ciani went down. I don't see a role for Tommy Pham for the rest of this season for this Cardinals team. And in fact, I think it benefits this Cardinals team if they waive Tommy Pham so that they can give more runway to guys like Victor Scott, guys like Lars Nootbaar. And when Michael Ciani backs, we're not at the position to where we say, do we play Ciani or do we play Victor Scott? You know who you're playing.
Yeah, I think you will see probably the Cardinals place Tommy Pham on waivers, and I think you'll probably see it today would be my guess. And I actually think it would be the smart roster decision because of what you were saying there. It just frees up opportunities, and it creates a roster spot for you. You know, and right now, Pham, who's on a $3 million contract, which he signed with the White Sox, he's on the hook, or the Cardinals, are on the hook for the remaining $850,000 of this contract. So if you place him on waivers, he gets claimed by somebody. First off, that team takes that money. But second, there's two things for that. One, you free up a 40-man roster spot, which you can then select the contract of, say, a Thomas Ajacin. And two, if you call up Thomas Ajacin when you select that contract, he's going to make the league minimum. So basically, it's just money in, money out. And we know the Cardinals really don't want to be adding on payroll. Well, you're not really subtracting or adding payroll. It's just a wash at what you're doing right there. So I like the idea of placing Tommy Pham on waivers, not because I think it's like a must that Tommy Pham has to get out of here. If you were contending right now, it would make a ton of sense to have Tommy Pham on this roster. I actually still love the way that they operated at the trade deadline of bringing these guys in to try and help them. Everything just went really south really fast for this team, but they're at a point now where it is, okay, we need to be playing for the future. So it makes the most sense to place him on waivers today so he has an opportunity to go potentially play for a playoff contending team, which he would be able to help somebody. Mm-hmm. Who that team is, I don't know, but he can help somebody if they were to claim him. And now you've got that roster spot. And to your point, you kind of unclog a little bit of the outfield, especially with Ciani, who's probably going to be taking up a roster spot here soon when he's able to come back from the IL, which will probably be next week would be my guess. Yeah. It just makes too much sense to try and waive him. And I don't think it's anything to do with Tommy Pham. It's just the position that the St. Louis Cardinals are in.
Yes, but I mean, I also look at it and I ask, like, has Tommy Pham made you a team that can compete for the playoffs? Like, take the first two games that he came to St. Louis out of the equation. And I know that's tough to do, but in those two games, he had 4 hits. One of those was that grand slam, and he had 6 RBIs. But from August 1st up until last night, he's gone 10 for 62 with a 161 batting average. He's got a 274 slug and a 528 OPS. I mean, has Tommy Pham been the bat that you thought he was going to be that could help you win? I don't necessarily think so. And look, the team, it's not just Tommy Pham. The team has been a problem offensively. But for the Cardinals, you're in a position now where if he's not helping you win, Why not put guys in the lineup that do help you win? In a perfect world, I'd love to see Jordan Walker get called back up in that spot and put him in the outfield. So you've got Victor Scott, Lars Nootbaar, and Jordan Walker. But I don't know if the Cardinals are going to do that. But what I don't want to happen is Tommy Pham stay here, Michael Ciani return, and then Victor Scott either goes back down to Memphis or Victor Scott becomes a fourth outfielder, and it's Tommy Pham, Lars Nootbaar, and Michael Ciani in your outfield. So for Tommy Pham, I think it's probably best for him, too. I'm sure he thought this was going to be a little bit more competitive than what it's been for the Cardinals. And for the Cardinals, you've got a lot of other faces to figure out who they are, including a guy like Luken Baker. Now, I know maybe I was a little too aggressive on my tees talking about how this team could help them.
I couldn't believe they'd make the playoffs if they had this guy on the roster sooner. This guy's not even hitting 200 still.
I think you'd be a little bit better inclined. I mean, yes, he's not hitting 200, but against left-handed pitchers in five plate appearances, he's got a 1,300 slug against left-handed pitchers.
What's that, one hit?
Yeah. One hit.
It was a home run, I think.
Fine with it. Here's the thing. There was more of a role for Luken Baker on this team than it feels like what it was for Tommy Pham. Now, Tommy Pham, you needed the outfield, you needed the bat, but Luken Baker was mashing in the minors, and he did the exact same role of hitting against left-handed pitchers. It's kind of one of those things when you see him come through in different moments, whether it was the home run that he had in one of those first at-bats, the single he had last night, the double that he had last night that Paul Goldschmidt scored him on. They're incremental moments that you look at and you're like, see, what are we doing? This is the roster mismanagement that concerns you, because a guy like that could have at least given you that Cardinals devil magic spark that we always seem to talk about. And instead, they rather go with guys that they were hoping could bring that spark.
Yeah, watching him in that double last night, I still don't know if Luken Baker's a big leaguer long term, but because there are some holes in his swing. But if you got this for like a 3-week stretch while the season was kind of in turmoil in early August, absolutely sign me up for that, because it's what we talked about. I think you mentioned it, I think while we were calling for them to call up Luken Baker that's the thing the Cardinals used to do, is capitalize on those like 3-week increments.
Yeah, when they called up Jordan Walker, and I said, like, give Baker the shot.
Yeah, and think about, like, I think you mentioned Jeremy Hazelbaker was the one that you'd mentioned too. Like, yeah, you know that guy's probably not going to be a long-term big leaguer, probably not going to be a long-term starter, but at least you can maybe maximize and squeeze all that juice out in that like 3-4 week span that you see him. And again, I kind of say 100 to him more for just tongue in cheek, because he's got a 795 OPS in the very small sample size we've seen. He's got 2 extra base hits. He's got the home run, as you mentioned. Like, he's doing damage, and he's getting on base too. Like, I know it's one thing that when you talk about Luken Baker, it's not so much his on base. He's actually given them pretty competitive at bats. Like, I think he's drawn 4 walks so far. It's why his on base is at 333. And the 2 hits he's just crushed the baseball. Mm-hmm. The double last night, the home run that you had mentioned. Like, why would you not capitalize on that sooner? I don't know if he would have saved their playoff chances, but he could have definitely helped them. He could have helped them kind of stay afloat, at least give them a threat against a left-handed pitcher off of the bench, and just to have somebody there that could have had a role, know? The one thing that Brandon Crawford didn't have was a role on this team. Luken Baker could have provided that for this team, and it is just incredibly frustrating that we are only getting to see him when we're basically at the time where they're going to be waiving Tommy Pham because they're out of it.
You're 10-14 since August 1st after last night. Could you have made that 14-10 if you had Luken Baker on this roster? And you bring up Jeremy Hazelbaker. Go back to 2016. 74 games. He had 4 doubles, 2 triples, 6 home runs, a 297 batting average, and a 990 OPS. Could you have gotten a month and a half out of Luken Baker doing that for you to provide you 5-6 more wins? Because if so, maybe you're not a playoff team, but guess what? You are. 1 or 2 games out of a playoff spot rather than 6 or 7 games out of a playoff spot. So, again, a lot of people, I'm seeing it on the Air Comfort Service text line, nobody on this roster, minors or majors, could make this team a playoff team. Maybe you're right.
Someone says we need Taylor Motter back.
I mean, Taylor Motter did have the flow, although I do like Luken Baker when he steps up to that plate. All I'm saying is...
huge.
He is so big. All I'm saying is every single time that we saw Nolan Gorman strike out at the plate, or we've seen Tommy Pham come in and not come through for a big moment, you got a guy who's in the minors that could have come up and maybe hit you a couple of home runs and provided you that spark. That's what the Cardinals seem to have been missing these last 2 years, is that guy that can provide them the spark that can catapult them to somewhat of a run. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get to questions and answers. You send us a question, 314-399-9646. We'll answer them for you. But coming up next, NFL Quick Hitters here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, Cardinals took home a winner as Nolan Arenado walked it off, and the Cardinals beat the Padres 4-3. They'll be back against the Padres today to close out the series. Game 4 of 4, looking to split the series tonight with the Padres. It'll be Sonny Gray on the mound for the Cardinals going up against Michael King, and it'll be an early one. First pitch will be at 1:15. And then for Mizzou tonight, they'll kick off the college football season against Murray State. That one will start at 7 o'clock, and then the Illini will as well, as they'll be going up against Eastern Illinois at 8 o'clock. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Time to get into some NFL quick hitters here on BK and Ferrario, along with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Fellas, y'all ready to jump on the Pittsburgh Steelers bandwagon?
Yeah.
Wasn't it you that said the Steelers will be better this year, Grant?
They'll be fine once Justin Fields takes over.
Yeah. About
It'll
that,
take
buddy.
about 2 weeks.
About that, buddy. They've named their starting quarterback. Steelers country, let's ride, because Russell Wilson is your number one QB for the Pittsburgh Steelers. How long does this realistically last?
2 weeks. Maybe
2
3
weeks. With Mike Tomlin, I don't see it lasting 2 weeks.
Yeah, he's kind of loyal to a fault. It took him forever to fire their offensive coordinator last year.
Well, and how long did they stick with the, what's-his-face? Rudolph. How long did they stick with him last year?
Well, wasn't it Kenny Pickett to start?
Kenny Pickett to start.
Or was it Trubisky to start?
I think it was Pickett.
Because
It was a
Trubisky
carousel
came in
last
later.
year.
Yeah.
So you start your season against the Steelers.
Yeah, but the difference is that I feel like they were kind of on the line with this to begin with between Wilson and Fields. So I think this sort of feels like to me that it's going to be, with the high competition between the two, if one's really not working and it looks bad, if you're not competing in games and you're not putting up points because your quarterback is not playing well and you have a capable one right behind him, I don't think it'll last long.
So here's the way they start the season. Against the Falcons, against the Broncos, home against the Chargers, against the Colts, home against the Cowboys. I think after that Cowboys game is when you see Justin Fields.
Well, I can see that too because those first few teams on their schedule aren't really defensive powerhouses.
Russell Wilson has one good game, and Mike Tomlin's like, oh, we've got the guy.
I think if they're going to make the change, it may not be till the bye week in week 9, because
Could also be the case.
You mentioned their schedule, and again, their offense is probably going to be one of the worst in football. I mean, I think Fields and Wilson led. I think it was like one scoring drive all preseason. It was bad. They took Iowa Hawkeye football to another level. I look at their schedule. I mean, you mentioned the first couple of games. Even past that, like at the Raiders versus the New York Giants, that's 2 more winnable games. And I'm not saying they win it, but with their defense, they'll at least have a fighting chance. There's a chance they go into their bye week at maybe 4-4. Now, that's the best case scenario. But if they go 4-4, maybe 3-5, I could see where Mike Tomlin hangs on and just says, you know what, let's wait, let's see if this gets figured out. Then the bye week is a much easier transition to a new quarterback and kind of implementing Justin Fields into the system. My guess is I would wait. I think they'll wait till about that bye week in week 9.
Yeah, I think Mike Tomlin's going to wait as long as possible, and that's going to keep them back to being a 500 team like it always does.
Somehow they'll still make the freaking playoffs. I don't get it.
Well, speaking of waiting, we continue to wait for Brandon Ayuk and Jamar Chase. Although their coaches and general managers seem to not feel like they're waiting. So I don't know if you saw their comments. I'll start with the Bengals head coach. This is what Zach Taylor had to say on Tuesday. He said that on Tuesday, Jamar Chase would continue to practice with the Bengals this week, but he wasn't at practice yesterday, and then he showed up in street clothes walking around the exterior of the field, and now Taylor is saying, yeah, his status is unknown for week 1 and it's day to day. And I forgot who put it out there to you when you sent it to the group text, basically saying like, yeah, the vibes are not good right now at Cincinnati training camp.
Yeah, there's a lot of buzz around Cincinnati. That
this is why I didn't want to buy into that team.
And they had weird vibes last year, if you remember correctly, and it was around with Chase, their wide receiver room. I can't remember if last year there was some buzz around Trey Hendrickson looking for a new deal, and I think there's more buzz about him again this year. Like, it's all off. And Burrow got hurt early in camp last year. He still has some limitations. Like,
can I ask this question? Could Jamar Chase be Stephon Diggs?
I could see it.
In terms of incredible wide receiver, puts up the numbers, but is a problem and is going to make his way through teams because he wants to be paid like Justin Jefferson. And in the Athletic piece today that they were talking about it, they had scouts going through and agents going through. And one agent essentially said, look, he wants to be paid like Justin Jefferson. Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb did not get Justin Jefferson money. You're not going to get Justin Jefferson money. I kind of wonder if he's got a little Stephon Diggs in him.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's possible that there's a little bit of that to him. I don't remember. How did it end in Minnesota for Stephon Diggs?
Didn't he demand a trade? He said, I want out.
I can't remember how it ended for him. I remember how it ended in Buffalo, and there was weird vibes coming off of that.
I thought there were weird vibes around the Minnesota Vikings exit, too. It was him and Kirk Cousins that didn't kind of get on the same page. Felt like it needed a clean split, and you just saw him traded.
He got upset. Wasn't getting the kind of action Jefferson wanted. Okay, that would make some sense. But I can see that a little bit with Jamar Chase, but it's one of those where if you're the Bengals, you almost have to pay him. You know, I don't think you're paying T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. I think a better wide receiver than what T. Higgins is at this point, I believe. So I think you've got to pay him if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, granted, he's got another year on his rookie deal before he even gets, I think, the fifth-year option. Like, dude, you're not getting paid this year. Like, it was a fun holdout. You did your job. Yeah. You know what? Show up. It's time to start practicing. These guys are not going to miss significant games. If I'm the Bengals, the 49ers, I'm still holding strong and saying, okay, well, we'll call your bluff. We'll see if you show up for week one. If not, are you going to really start to sit out part of the season and continue to rack up these fines? Dude, you need to play these seasons to
get paid.
And get to free agency.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't get it. I don't, you know what, the holdout, I understand it to an extent, but, man, at some point, you've got to start reporting.
And this is, again, why I'm concerned, because, like, the bad vibes, dude, those get worse if you don't show up to week one and, let's say, Cincinnati loses their first game of the season. And then it becomes anger towards the player from holding out with his teammates. Like, it just, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'd be putting any stock into the Cincinnati Bengals until that thing gets figured out. The other side of the coin, the San Francisco 49ers, their GM, John Lynch, who said that the 49ers are expecting Brandon Ayuk to practice, and yesterday, he didn't practice also. And this was like day after Deebo Samuel saying, like, oh, he's going to be back. He's going to be playing week one. We're going to be fine. We're going to go for a Super Bowl this year. That one doesn't feel like as bad of vibes as the Jamar Chase one does, but this one still seems problematic if you're the 49ers.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. San Francisco's not giving off bad vibes, which I don't understand why there's such a difference, because I think Trent Williams was holding out as well, their left tackle. But yeah, both these guys are going to play week one. Like, I'm not going to buy that they're going to sit out.
Because I put money into Jamar Chase being on my fantasy team.
These guys are going to play week one. Brandon Ayuk's going to start to report here soon. I expect Jamar Chase is going to report. Now, it may not be till this weekend. It may not be till past Labor Day. I would be shocked. Like, if you told me put a percentage chance on these guys playing in week one, I'm at 95%. These guys are going to play because of what we just said.
Yeah, somebody texted in and said, guys, every wide receiver is the same as Stephon Diggs. I mean, yes and no. Like, CeeDee Lamb did his holdout, and he got paid, but it wasn't like he was demanding to be paid more than Justin Jefferson. I mean, Tyreek Hill kind of flew under the radar in terms of just signed the deal with the Miami Dolphins, and it wasn't really problematic. I think every wide receiver wants to get paid. I just think there are certain guys that always seem to be able to find a problem with their team.
Ayuk situation, I can understand a little bit, because it seems pretty clear that San Fran probably not going to bring back Brandon Ayuk, because they've got a bunch of guys they got to figure out contracts for, including Brock Purdy here shortly.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, he's going to get like $55-60 million.
They're winning, so.
Exactly. And they've got Samuel under contract. They've got Kittle under contract. McCaffrey got another big pay raise. Like, they just don't have the money. So if you're Brandon Ayuk and you're looking at this going, do I really want to play on my current contract, get hurt, and potentially lose out on a $25 to $30 million AAV? I can get where Brandon Ayuk's coming from a little bit. But I also understand, like, hey, man, at some point, if they don't get you the contract, you don't get the trade. And it's not like they didn't try to trade him. It sounds like they had plenty of offers out on the table, and he said, I don't want to go to New England.
Right.
I don't want to go to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, he wanted to go to one team.
So now you have to report then. Now it is time. The Jamar Chase one's the one that's just interesting, because there's another year under the deal. He's got the team option. Like, it's not like he's, like, due for a raise, and it's not like Cincinnati hasn't made it pretty public, like, hey,
and you're a good team.
To keep him. Yeah, that's the other thing.
Like, at the time with Stephon Diggs in Minnesota, it felt like they weren't going anywhere, and you needed some type of change. You were a good team, and you're demanding to get paid. I don't know. Somebody also texted in and said Cooper Kupp doesn't seem to have that mentality. So there you go, T-Bump. Cooper Kupp's also hurt every single day.
That's a team player, and he's got a contract, so I don't understand.
Yeah. Tanner Hendrickson, that's a team player right there. We'll find out until Puka needs to get paid. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, you send us your questions, 314-399-9646. We'll answer your questions next here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. 314-399-9646 is our Air Comfort Service text line. Also live up on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. The Graveyard Chat is off and running, so you can drop in on that one for today's questions and answers segment. Let's start here from the 618. Alex, what were your thoughts on Corey Pronman being so down on the Blues pipeline? For those that don't know, he had him ranked 16th on his athletic piece, and he's just kind of going through. I think he's doing like 8 every single day from top to bottom. These prospect pipeline lists are always so tough because, like, look, I think Corey Pronman is incredible at what he does, but if you read his piece, he was down on Dalibor Dvorsky, saying he was their second best prospect. If you read Scott Wheeler's piece from when Dalibor Dvorsky was available in the draft and he joined BK and Ferrario when we were talking to him the night of the draft, he has cited that this guy's got all the skill in the world, and some scouts have comped him to what Nicholas Backstrom was coming into the NHL. So, like, it's tough. I personally felt like the Blues were going to be somewhere between 10 and 12 with what they've got, but time is just going to tell with Corey Pronman in this prospect list. Last year, I think they were like 21st, and then they jumped to 16th, so it's always kind of moving.
Yeah, I think they should have been higher, and, I mean, just go back to the World Juniors and how many Blues prospects were just performing like crazy, and they were partially part of the talk of the World Juniors, how well they were playing. I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that, yes, they have a player like Dalibor Dvorsky, but they don't have that like Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon style of player, which most teams don't, but they don't have that like top end superstar. Whereas like Dalibor Dvorsky, to me, at least right now, feels like a Vladimir Tarasenko sort of star, to where like he's not going to be a top 5 player in the league, but he's going to be your best player. But that's just how the Blues build their team. They're not going to build around a top number 1 Connor McDavid type of player. They're going to, be death by 1,000 cuts and have a lot of players that are very good. And I think when it comes to ranking prospect pools, when you see players that are flashy and guys that are going to be those top end players on other teams, they end up being higher on the list than, say, the Blues, when the Blues probably have more of a deep list of players on their prospect.
I'm higher up on a couple of those guys than Corey Pronman is, but again, I'm more of the nerd that looks at the numbers all the time than other people are. From the 314, guys, what would your thoughts be if the Cardinals were to offer Mason Wynn a contract extension sooner rather than later? T-Bone, floor is yours.
Do it. No.
Why not, man? He's a star.
I could agree that he's going to be a star. I don't know if he's there yet, but he could become a star. The thing is with Mason Wynn, if he doesn't hit for power, and I'm not saying he should. Like, I'm not telling you he should sell out and try to be a 30 home run guy next year. Doesn't hit for power, he's never going to outprice himself from you. That's kind of the nice thing for a shortstop that plays Gold Glove level defense and is a guy that gets on base because he hits for average and is kind of the singles hitter. I wouldn't give him a contract extension just because, like, when I think contract extension, I think like, oh man, if this guy ends up hitting his ceiling, this guy is going to get super expensive, and then like maybe you can't afford him in arbitration, like Jordan Walker, for example. Walker hits his ceiling.
That won't be a problem.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it. But if Walker hits his ceiling, like, there's a chance he makes legitimate money in arbitration. So what do you want to do? You want to try and get him to sign a contract extension. You get a little bit more value, bring down some of that money, and potentially when he should be making, say, $15 million in year 3 of ARB, you're getting him at $10 million. Maybe you buy a year or 2 of free agency. I just don't think Mason Wynn's ever going to outprice himself. I mean, Luis Arraez, we saw that guy's an unbelievable
He's incredible.
hitter.
That pitch that he got to yesterday that he just towed the line on the foul on third baseline, unbelievable.
And the reason I mentioned his name is that guy flirted, Wynn's not doing this, but he flirted with 400 last year. Mm-hmm. That guy lost his arbitration case to the Miami freaking Marlins.
Arbitration be wild, man.
If you're not hitting for power, you're not getting as much money. So that's why I would say, like, I love Mason Wynn. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be the shortstop for the next 7 years for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah.
No need to give him a contract extension.
From the 314, who scores the first touchdown tonight for the Mizzou season?
Ooh.
Luther Burden. I say he has 3 of them tonight. The Heisman watch starts tonight against
I like
Murray.
That.
3 touchdowns for Luther Burden.
I will go with, I think you'll see, I'll go a little different. I'll go Brady Cook touchdown.
Oh.
Little QB run. They'll run like the read option because I think they're going to get the running backs involved heavily tonight. Do a little read option once you get in that goal line situation, and then he just jogs that one in. That'll be my guess. I'll go Brady Cook.
Who's their running back that'll score?
I think you see both of Nate Noel. Is it Noel? I think this is his name, and Marcus Carroll.
Is that the App State? Is that Noel?
Yeah, and then Carroll's the one from Georgia State. I bet you see both of them score.
Let's get a couple more of these. Do you think Goldie's recent performance is real, or an apparition? Exit velocity looks great. Looks like he's seeing the ball. Does this guy return?
I heard BT say yesterday on the fast lane that he thinks the Cardinals might still bring him back, which was baffling still. Every time I hear it, even though I'm just starting to accept fate, it surprises me. I just don't think he's coming back for Goldie. And I think what you're seeing, and I think it's why his exit velo numbers are up, is he's selling out for power. And he's really trying to pull the baseball. And you know what? He can get away with that. Like, I have no issue with that. But you've got an internal first baseman in-house with Alec Burleson. I would just move him to that position. Let Goldie walk. Thanks for your service, Paul Goldschmidt. You are awesome, and especially in 2022 when you won an MVP, probably a Cardinals Hall of Famer. But I wouldn't bring him back. I think it's time to just turn things over to the young guys. And if I believe it's real or not, look, again, he's selling out for power. Strikeout rate has really ballooned. Walk rate's really gone down. That's why his on bases. Look, guys, he doesn't have a 700 OPS still. So, no, I'm not buying that he's back.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Doesn't he have to be paid a certain amount of money? Isn't it like 20 mil?
I don't think it's...
No, it's not that?
No, I don't...
For some reason, I thought it was like he had, like there was a minimum.
There's any requirement on what he has to make, if I'm not
I think it all comes down to how much money they're going to pay him. If you're going to bring him back for...
In the role.
Yeah, the role. If you're going to bring him back as like you're coming off of the bench and you're only hitting against left-handed pitchers, then great.
What did Pujols make in this year here?
Wasn't it? It was less than $1 million, wasn't it? And then he had like bonus performance stuff?
I thought it was a little more, like 2.5,
It might have
5.
been. I don't remember. I thought it was very low.
The reason I asked that is... To me, if you were going to bring back Paul Goldschmidt, I don't even think he would take this because I think somebody would pay him. Yeah. It was 1 year for $2.5 million. It did have some bonuses attached to it, to your point. Like, if you offered him a 1 year, $5 million deal, would he take that to be a platoon bat with Alec Burleson at first base, be a DH against left-handed pitching potentially too, a guy that comes off the bench? He's willing to take that. I'm in. You know what? I can convince myself. Granted, I still would just go a youth movement, but if that's how they sold it, I could see how you get there. Problem is like, I know how this works. They'll probably go like $10 million and they'll defer like $10 million and they'll say it counts against the payroll, and then they'll start him at first base and you look at it and you go, man, he still doesn't have a 700 OPS
and
for
they'll
the
say
second
they need
year in a row.
leadership. Yeah.
Oh, God,
it'll
if
all
I have
happen.
to hear about the leadership again.
Final one we'll get to. Alex, do you think pairing of Suter and Tucker could be what the Blues had in Jackman and Pollock? Absolutely not, because I don't think Tyler Tucker's on this team. I think Tyler Tucker's in the American Hockey League. I think it's Suter and Kessel. And then your seventh defenseman is either going to be Perunovic or P.O. Joseph. I don't think Tucker's. I think he's the one that we always talk about asset management. I think he's the one that you can sneak through waivers without losing him. Guy who's probably at best a third pair defenseman, does bring physicality, but is a former 7th round draft pick. I think that sneaks through waivers before a Perunovic and a P.O. Joseph does. So no, I don't even think those two are playing together. I think your pairing is going to be Suter and Kessel to start things off, and then throughout the season, obviously things can change.
Real quick, I know we're gonna go to break.
No, you're fine.
Who would you say Suter's more like of those two, Pollock or Jackman? I'd probably say Jackman.
I would say Jackman. I
don't think Tucker's close to Pollock. He was a big dude and would crush people, but he was a good defenseman.
I don't think you have a Roman Pollock. Roman Pollock was good, but Roman Pollock was like a Joel Edmondson, if that, without any offense. Like, all he did was just
I'd agree with that.
Throw cross checks in front of the net. Like,
I loved Pollock.
I did too.
Here.
I mean, he was a great player. I mean, he was a perfect third pair defenseman. Robert Bortuzzo is probably a better comp to that one. Like, Robert Bortuzzo stayed in his own zone, dove in front of pucks, pushed guys around, but Bortuzzo didn't drop the gloves as much as Pollock did. But yeah, Tucker's not that. Tucker might be able to get to that, but you're going to have to play a certain style of hockey in the NHL that's just not really around anymore. Roman Pollock, I don't think that is around anymore as much as it used to be. Suter is total Barrett Jackman, to where you throw cross checks after whistles, putting the stinky mitt in the face while the referee's trying to break things up. That's total Ryan Suter, which might be a good thing for this Blues team. With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Appreciate everybody's questions on our questions and answers segment. Coming up next, Nolan Arenado made some comments last night after his walk-off hit that seemed to turn a lot of people's heads. Greg Amsinger also made some comments that seemed to turn some people's heads. We'll discuss both coming up next year on 101 ESPN.
Mason's just been our best player, man. This guy's a stud. I couldn't be more impressed with the guy, with the way he works. And he's smart, man. He's smart with his work. And big, man, he's just making strides every day. I'm happy to drive him in, man. They did their job, and it was about time I did mine.
That was Nolan Arenado, courtesy of Bally Sportsman last night, who had another big moment, and it's the second walk-off moment for the Cardinals in a week. Did it also against the Milwaukee Brewers when he hit that grand slam in extra innings to help the Cardinals win. And Nolan Arenado, there's no question, his offense has significantly improved since August 1st. He's been one of the better Cardinals players since August 1st. Now, it hasn't done a whole lot of good for the Cardinals because they've still lost a lot of games, and they're still outside of the playoffs looking in. But having that moment last night where he has the winning run scored because of his at-bat, him talking afterwards, and you go back to that Milwaukee game for how he talked once he hits that walk-off grand slam, him talking about how it hasn't been a good season for me, but we're going to keep grinding, we're going to work through this. It's all stuff you'd expect. But then Nolan Arenado went on in the locker room after the win, and this was the moment, T-Bone, that I kind of perked my ears.
I think what I come to realize is if I'm not going to perform well, I'm definitely not going to, be a cancer in this clubhouse to anybody. I'm still going to try to help. I could still lead in different ways. It may not be performance, but I can still help these guys out, spend time with them, get to know them. And I feel like, the young guys, the energy has kind of helped me perform better because, I just want to compete with them and enjoy it. And, I don't know. I'm just trying to get lost in the competition, not too worried about what my numbers say. I know they're not where I want them to be, but I can't change it overnight either.
So I want to be clear about what I'm about to say. In no way am I going to act like all of a sudden Nolan Arenado is turned into this superhero for the Cardinals and everything that has taken place this season and years past just goes away. But I do think it's important to identify when a guy has kind of a, for a lack of a better phrase, life-changing moment. And it really feels like what Nolan Arenado is going through this season is what rock bottom feels like. Offensively, this guy has been so bad that it feels like all of Cardinals Nation has been like, this guy's got to go. Which is wild because, look, he has performed very poorly for the team. And it's been kind of the scuttlebutt that, behind closed doors, Nolan Arenado might not be the type of leader that you want for your younger players. Even he said so in spring training that, he's not a leader type of player. And it got to the point where it was like, well, Nolan Arenado, if you're not hitting and you're not a leader, what role do you have for this Cardinals team? This feels like a guy who realizes his career might be taking a turn for the worse, and now he's got to start having an impact in other places. And we've heard a lot this season that, guys like Mason Wynn who bring that competitive fire, that does a lot of good for Nolan Arenado. And those comments, again, I don't want to get too far out over my skis because I know a lot of people don't value leadership like I do. I just personally feel like it's so impactful because you're around hockey players all the time and you see the impact of it. But hearing him talk like that, seeing him start to have success again in August, it definitely does create a little bit more optimism for me, T-Bone, of saying like, hey, if Nolan Arenado is going to be bluntly honest with himself that I am not the MVP that I once was, but I still can be a good enough player and I can help impact these guys, then there's a role for him on this team, unlike what we thought 3 months ago that was, there's no role for you here.
Yeah, that to me last night was the first time when I saw those quotes and heard them was, you know what, that sounds like a guy that is a leader for the St. Louis Cardinals. And I've questioned that, especially when last year, because I was in the locker room the day that he said, we've got just too many young guys. And I remember looking around and I said to BK at the time, I said, what is he talking about? He's acting like this is the problem. And the young guys are performing. And then he had the weird comment coming into spring training where he mentioned something about the young guys. We were too young last year, while also not acknowledging how he was one of the last ones to show up to spring training while the young guys beat him down there to Jupiter, Florida. But when I heard those comments last night, that was the first time I was like, you know what? He's now starting to mold into the guy that you really want to see your top paid players be, which is not just a guy that produces, because he is playing a little bit better, but to be a leader in that locker room, to be a guy that is kind of working with the young guys, and it no longer is, hey, don't come talk to me. I'm going through my own personal struggles, which I think was something he said last year of, I'm going through my own stuff. Hey, I need to figure out my stuff. It's hard for me to help you while I'm trying to figure out my stuff.
I'm not a vocal guy, he said. Like, I'm the kind of guy that leads by performance.
Sounds more open-minded to it now. And now sounds like a guy that's willing to connect more with the young guys. I mean, you saw the way, I thought it was telling last night when you see that walk-off hit, Mason Wynn goes in, gets that big bear hug from Nolan Arenado. Loved it so much he went back for seconds. Got a second
who doesn't want a good bear hug, though?
And then you saw Arenado even talk with Victor Scott II, who, if Scott doesn't come through in that inning and gets on base because of that base hit, well, then you're looking at Arenado doesn't even get a chance to have that walk-off hit last night. It feels like the season that is kind of, whether you want to say it's humble Nolan Arenado or you're just seeing him kind of learn and kind of, I don't know if mature is the right word because he is a veteran, but just grow more into this role.
It is mature, though, because he's never been in this position, and when he was with Colorado, he couldn't handle it properly, and that's why he wanted to get to St. Louis.
And I can't help but wonder if you've seen a little bit of kind of Matt Carpenter kind of helping Nolan Arenado help connect this between the younger guys and the veterans. You know, Carp was brought in to be a guy that was a veteran in that clubhouse and be a guy that can be a sounding board for the younger hitters. Well, I also think he was in there to kind of help some of those veteran guys as well of, hey, here's what, even though you are going through it, you also got to help these young guys. And maybe that doesn't mean going and helping them in the batting cage per se, but if they got a question, be at least willing to listen to it.
You be approachable. And
Exactly.
and sometimes I think guys, and that's the part that I do find fascinating with Nolan Arenado, and I'd love to have a conversation with him about it, because a lot of guys that do have that fire don't want to be approachable. They want to do their own thing. They want to go about their business. And when they don't perform, that weight carries on them. And a guy like Nolan Arenado, we've seen it. When things are bad, he gets bad, and it carries on him. And it just feels like it's a guy that's recognizing, hey, I can't let my poor performance carry on me if this team wants to have success. In the past, I was able to, because guess who was around? Yadier Molina, Albert Pujols. Those guys were able to be the approachable ones and the ones that could handle things, and Nolan Arenado could go about his business. But now it just feels like he's realizing this team has been bad for back-to-back years. And as much as I'd like to complain about how the roster might not be ready to go or they don't have as competitive of a roster as I want, I got to look in the mirror. And there's a lot of younger dudes right now that are scuffling at the major league level. And until those guys get to their level, we are not going to have success. It just felt like a moment of clarity for Nolan Arenado that was like, hey, I don't want to be gone from St. Louis. I want to win in St. Louis. But the only way for me to win in St. Louis is if I'm a part of the solution, not the problem.
And you mentioned, he doesn't want to be the guy. He mentioned, that he doesn't want to be the guy that's kind of the cancer in the locker room. I think if you're Nolan Arenado, I think you kind of start to get a set. You start to kind of look in, to your point, look in the mirror. And you say, okay, I was the one who asked out of Colorado. I was the one that was publicly saying, the young guys, were we too young? Do we need to rely on the young guys as much? I'm not as approachable. And then I have this bad season, and he knows it. He said it publicly. He's not the same guy he was 2 years ago where he was hitting for power, pulling the ball. He's more of a singles hitter at this point. And look, his on-field production is a different conversation. The Cardinals will need him to be better on the field production-wise, making $32 million going into next season. But I think at some point, if you're Nolan Arenado, you look yourself in the mirror and you say, you know what, if I'm not going to be that guy, I can't be the guy that causes problems in the locker room that can really send this thing into a tailspin. And so I like the fact that he's willing to come out and say publicly, hey, I know that I need to be a guy that's working with the young guys, have a relationship with the young guys. It's no longer the old school way of, hey, the veterans are over here and the rookies are over here. I loved what we heard from Nolan Arenado last night, and we'll see if it continues to play out. And I saw BK tweet this morning. There was a couple days ago Arenado posted a photo with a couple of his teammates.
Pages, Mason Wynn, and Lars Nootbaar.
Yeah, after a game. And I was like, okay, I didn't read too much into it now. And now I look at it and go, okay, it all feels kind of connected. Arenado is really starting to kind of bond with those guys and become a guy that should be a leader in that clubhouse.
So, from one guy making comments that were on the positive side, T-Bone, to another who on the opening drive may have been pointing fingers at some Cardinals fans.
But they still have a chance. There's a month left. We've seen crazier things happen. I'll just Google search 2011 and how that all went down for the St. Louis Cardinals. They were way further out of it than they are right now. And they came back, and it was an incredible comeback. But they were getting supported the entire season. There were people in the stands all year long. So the fact that this is not the Chicago White Sox, I understand. White Sox, terrible product, 70 games under 500. Don't go see them. But this is a 500 team for the most part. It makes no sense to me. It makes zero sense to me. They're a 5-game winning streak away from being one of the fun stories to talk about on MLB Network. That is ridiculous that you're not going to the game and supporting the Cardinals. It's not the same age range as that 2011 team by any stretch of the imagination, but this team is scary and sneaky in different ways. They can still pull something out of that.
You want to go first?
Are we really doing this?
Which one are you going to talk about?
What do you mean? Which one are we going?
There's like 2 comments for me that I'm like, I don't get it.
Okay, well, here, you give me the one that you're questioning, and I'll give you one that I'm questioning.
Okay, I'll start. Well, I think you're going to question, I'm guessing, the 2011.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go with I can't believe Cardinals fans aren't going to games. Greg, you just tried to sell me a T-shirt that's got holes in it. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but it's Nike.
No, yeah, exciting. Of course people are going to the games. This team stinks. I don't blame the Cardinals fans for not wanting to go to these games. I heard that this morning, and I was just baffled that he was calling out the Cardinals fan base. This team's not worth spending money on to go to the ballpark. I can't blame Cardinals fans for deciding not to go,
Don't tell Greg that the Cardinals offense is just as bad as the White Sox offense in the second half.
Especially with runners in scoring position. I couldn't believe this. It's not even sellable.
The expected win-loss for the Cardinals is 60 and 73. In fact, they're above 500 on home field right now. You know where they don't play well? On the road, where they're 4 games below 500. And I'm sorry, but this is why it concerned me about the Milwaukee Brewers winning that series. And if you win again today, it's going to be, you split with the Padres. Are we really going to do this? Are we really going to point to the 2011 Cardinals and say, well, let's not forget the Cardinals went on a historic run in 2011 and look what took place? Can we please just pull up the roster for that Cardinals offense? Hey, T-Bone, how many players on the Cardinals roster this season have a OPS plus above 100?
How many have a one above 100?
Yeah, above 100 on the Cardinals this season.
I'll go 3.
I don't even think it's 3. I think it's 1. And I'd have to pull it up. I don't have the answer. I was legitimately asking you.
Oh, I'm sure this team has more than 1.
Okay, pull it up because I don't think they do.
Arenado, Wynn, and Contreras, but he's hurt. Wynn's above league average. Arenado's right at league average. Donovan's at league average. Burleson's at above league average.
So how many is that?
That would be 4 of your regulars.
Okay. Now, can I read you off the 2011 players that had an OPS plus above 100?
Oh, well, they had like a legitimate offense.
Yachty had a 124. Pujols had a 148. Matt Holliday, 151. Berkman, 164. Alan freaking Craig, who was a bench player for them, had a 151 OPS plus. Are we really going to sit here and say, well, look at what the 2011 Cardinals did? Sure. If you're going to tell me that Albert Pujols, Lance Berkman, Matt Holliday, and Alan Craig are coming through this door for the Cardinals, then I'll believe it. But let's not start pointing fingers and saying Cardinals fans stop supporting the team, and that's why they've gone through this downfall. Look at what their road record is in the month of August. There were no Cardinals fans in those stands. It was the other team, and the Cardinals lost. I just can't get on board with that one.
To the 2011 point, you mentioned the expected win-loss for the 2024 Cardinals, the Pythagorean win-loss theorem or whatever it is
I love
called.
when you say that word.
This team, based on that, their expected win-loss should be the 1673, what you said. Well, Baseball Reference, they don't have, I looked at today's date. Where were the 2011 Cardinals? They were way out of it. But their expected win-loss percentage was .528. They were way better in terms of just because of their run differential. They were one of those teams that you looked at and said, okay, this doesn't seem to make sense. I still can't get over Greg Amster and be like, I can't believe Cardinals fans aren't going to the games.
And that's the thing I think that bugged me the most. It's like if we're really going to sit there and say the reason that the Cardinals are losing is because the Cardinals fans aren't supporting them, I will not buy into that notion.
They're missing, and this is the thing that the Cardinals are a 500 team. And look, 500 teams are frustrating, but I can understand how you can get to a point where you support a 500 team. But the thing is, if you have a 500 team, you got to have superstars that are worth going to go see. The Blues for a while were floating around 500 this past season, but it was fun to watch Jordan Binnington. He was awesome last season. Yeah. Robert Thomas was
fun to watch Jake Neighbors.
Jake Neighbors was having a good year, a breakout year. Robert Thomas was having a breakout year and looks like a potential top 10 centerman in the NHL for the next 5 to 10 years potentially. What am I looking at for the Cardinals that excites me?
One player that's worth the money of admission right now, which honestly is free.
Mason Wynn?
Mason Wynn.
Yeah.
That's one guy.
And that's a shot to say it's worth the price of admission because they are free tickets, essentially.
I was going to say. So hey, man, more power to Greg. I know that Cardinals blood, Cardinals red runs deep.
No power to Greg.
But,
Greg showed his paycheck came from Major League Baseball today.
I mean, woof on that one. This is why it bothers me when you see the signs of life. And I hate being the ultimate pessimist. But it just bothers me because it always goes back to 2011. Just like the Blues, where it was you go back to 2019. No, can we stop that? Because that's not going to happen again.
That's the one-off.
Yeah, that's not going to happen again. I promise you that. With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. There is one area, though, that is causing the Cardinals to struggle so much, and it's not just their offense. We'll discuss that next on 101 ESPN. So last night, it reared its ugly head once again against the Cardinals, the other team running buck wild on St. Louis. With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. The Padres went 3 for 3 in stolen base attempts last night. This season, the Cardinals have allowed 126 stolen bases, which is tied for the most in Major League Baseball. And T-Bone brought up how this is impacting the Cardinals more so than just guys running on the Cardinals. It's impacting the slugging percentage against. And T-Bone, I want you to explain to our listeners what you came up with.
Yeah, so slugging percentage across baseball is calculated by simply total bases divided by at-bats. And total bases, that doesn't include, if you get a single and you get to third, you don't get 2 bases for running to third. It's just the single's worth 1, double's worth 2, so on, so forth. So the Cardinals slugging percentage against them so far this season is .408. It's kind of like bottom 10 in Major League Baseball in terms of what they've been able to hold opponents to slug-wise. Well, the reason that we keep talking about, we've talked about this in the past with, what can make a Victor Scott dangerous? Well, it's what we would call the quote-unquote manufactured slug, which is he gets the single or draws the walk, and then he steals second, which equals essentially a stolen base. So I'm going to be honest on the front end. It's tough to find out whether this is the best way to calculate this or not, but I do think it does tell a decent story as to the problem that the inability to catch base runners and limit the running game has had for the St. Louis Cardinals this season on the pitching staff. So what I did was I took all 126 stolen bases that the Cardinals have allowed this season, which is tied for the most in Major League Baseball coming into today.
Who's it tied with, by the way? Do you know?
I think it's San Francisco, if I remember correctly. Yeah, San Fran. But
I was hoping you were going to say the White Sox, and I was going to go back to Greg Amsinger's comment.
They were high up there, though. But so what I did was I took all 126 of those stolen bases, and to make this as manufactured slug, I basically added that to the total of singles that the Cardinals have allowed to see what that would do to the slugging percentage. Since it is just one base, I didn't want to say, well, this equals a double now. No, I'm just going to count it as another single, just to kind of give us somewhat of an idea.
An extra hit against them.
So if you add that in and then you try to calculate the Cardinals slugging percentage against the season, it jumps almost 30 points in what the slug against the St. Louis Cardinals would have been this season. Again, I mentioned it's at .408 coming into today. If you add in kind of this manufactured slug of what we're talking about, the 126 stolen bases, the Cardinals slugging percentage against them would be .436 this season. A comparison of what that jump equals, just in terms of like what the difference is in a batter, Starling Marte, who's a good hitter, doesn't have much pop in his career anymore, to a C.J. Abrams, who was on fire early on in the season.
Jeez.
There are only 3 teams in Major League Baseball that are slugging above this .436 mark.
I was just going to say that.
The Boston Red Sox, the New York Yankees, and the Baltimore Orioles.
So essentially what it is the Arizona Diamondbacks are up against you with slug percentage because they're .434. They're right below that .436 mark.
And it just shows you the impact that this running game can have by pushing guys into another scoring position. And, let's just be honest, there is no fear to run on the St. Louis Cardinals. We always talked about the Yadier Molina effect of, hey, man, and look, there's a little bit of difference to it. I still don't think people would have been running on Yachty with these bigger bases that are here. But there was a effect that it had on the other team of, okay, well, if we get a single, that's a single. We're not going anywhere to second base. We've got to move that guy over. Cardinals this year, 126 times. And look, I don't know. I couldn't find. Trust me, I was digging all over the place last night. There was some weird stuff on the internet on MLB websites.
Well, you can't Google that stuff,
I was looking up trying to find, okay, how many times has this been a walk or a single that steals second base? I couldn't find it. But whether it is 126 times, which I don't think it is, or it is 90 times, that's essentially an extra base hit that gets to happen where that guy's standing at second base, and they had to do nothing to get that guy there. And that's why I found it so interesting that this manufactured slug bumps up the percentage almost 30 points and shows you just how big of an issue this really is causing for the St. Louis Cardinals. And it's something that's going to have to be improved, whether that be internally. That means Herrera finds a way to throw batters out. Pages gets better at doing it too. Willson Contreras, maybe it is just more of a healthy season from Willson Contreras. He's had 2 major injuries that have kept him out behind the plate for a significant amount of time. Maybe that's what the answer is, but it is clearly something when I was looking at these numbers last night that screams to me this has to improve next year. Whether they are trying to compete or not, this is something that's going to have to be better.
And to look at it in this sense, you're talking about that one run that could impact the game. In the first half of the season, that one run was how Cardinals were winning. What were they, 5 or 6 games above 500 in one-run games?
Yeah, they were 18-12, I believe it was.
That was the narrative. We had all talked about, hey, the Cardinals are going to be able to showcase their ability to win tight baseball games. And now if you look at it post-All-Star break, they're 6 games below 500 win one-run games. So, if you're talking about it, I know it doesn't sound like much. It's like, oh, well, it's just one guy. What's the big deal? The problem is when it happens 3 times against you, when they go 3 for 3, there's no fear like you mentioned. And here's the real thing. I don't know if there's a permanent fix internally. I mean, your 3 catchers, you've seen them all this season, and they've all run wild on you. Wilson Contreras started the year off well, and then it dipped off once the injuries took place, which makes a lot of sense. But, I mean, the moment Ivan Herrera got back behind the plate, other teams were going crazy. And then Pedro Pajes, I know he's supposed to be the defensive upgrade, but it doesn't really look like it that much when he's behind the plate. But these are the 3 guys that you've got as your catcher. So the only internal improvement that you can pull off with this is your pitchers need to start getting the ball to the plate faster. There needs to be less hesitation and more quick release to get there. But the problem with that is, do you trust your catcher to throw these base runners out? I always thought you take it for granted because Yadier Molina was so good and nobody wanted to run on him. But unless this Cardinals offense can really have an uptick in terms of their power outage and ability to score more runs, this could be pretty massive for this team in terms of, like, you might be losing more games than you should be because of these one-run outcomes of the other team taking advantage of your poor defense behind the plate.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything. I mean, you mentioned the pitchers need to be quicker to the plate. I think you will need to see that has to improve. And I wonder if that's going to be something that they really work on, especially with younger guys like McGreevy and Graceffo who are down in the minor leagues. Maybe they make that more of a emphasis for pitchers down in the system. Quinn Matthews, Tinkins, all these guys. I can't remember who it is that's told the story, but maybe it was Jim Edmonds or maybe it was BT on the broadcast. But they've mentioned, like, there was a certain threshold. Like, if you didn't do this and didn't have this quick of a movement to the plate with runners on, you weren't getting called up to the big leagues the way Cardinals used to operate. I think there is a little bit of it to Contreras, Herrera, Pajes, those guys needing to be better. Contreras was okay this season. He wasn't anything to write home about, but all those things have to be looked at to try and fix this problem, because one thing that I think, as much as we want to see the younger guys up here like the McGreevy, Graceffo, Andre Pallante, see some of these guys get these opportunities, it's going to be a lot to ask of them if all of a sudden, like, the guy gets on base and suddenly he's at second base every single time that they get on, and there's not much of a threat to throw those guys out. I mean, 3 times yesterday, we've seen the teams like the Reds try and do it 5-6 times in a game to try and steal multiple bases on the Cardinals. So it's clear it's a major issue for them. My hope is that they can fix this internally. I do think they can fix the noodle arm that they talk about with Ivan Herrera.
Yeah.
I think you can work with a Pedro Pajes to try and fix this. I think you can work with your starting pitchers and how quick they are to the plate. All those things that can be improved, but you really need to start seeing those by the time you get into camp next year, because otherwise you're going to have this problem be a major issue once again next season.
From the 314, good thing Yadier Molina's on the coaching staff and is working with these guys to throw runners out.
No comment.
Tanner Hendrickson, Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up at 15, we've got the junk drawer. But coming up next, college football season officially underway tonight. Mizzou in action, Illinois in action. But, yeah, we're not excited about that one. Who's the face of college football this season? T-Bone and I will discuss, and Grant will discuss that. And what are you watching for in these Mizzou and Illinois games later on tonight? We'll hit that next here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Nolan Arenado walked it off for the Cardinals last night as they picked up a win for St. Louis. They took down the Padres 4-3. They'll close out that series today against the Padres as it'll be a 1:15 start, less than an hour until first pitch, looking to split this series. It'll be Sonny Gray for the Cardinals going up against Michael King. Again, a 1:15 first pitch from Buch Stadium. And then in college football tonight, a couple of local teams will be starting their season. Mizzou will kick off at 7 o'clock against Murray State, and then the Illini against Eastern Illinois at 8. I'm Grant Francis. This is SportsCenter Update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
So Mizzou football in action tonight. Illinois football in action tonight. Lindenwood in action tonight. T-Bone taking on number 11. Are they number 11? It's not number 11.
I don't think
KU?
they're 11, but they're ranked.
They will be number 11.
They're 10 after Florida State.
Yeah, I was going to say they'll be 11 after they put up 111 points on Lindenwood later on tonight. And this is coming from an alum of Lindenwood University. But college football officially underway this evening. And T-Bone brought this topic up when we were kind of brainstorming for the show today. And he said, who's the face of college football this season? And honestly, you asked me that at about 10:20. I still don't know. I still don't know who the face of college football is, because last year I would say it's still Nick Saban. I guess if I was to pick somebody, it would be Kirby Smart as the face of college football.
Really? Because I don't think Kirby, because he's the name that I saw was brought up in.
I don't think there's a player that's the face of college football.
It's funny because I think it's a family that's the face of college football, and that would be the Sanders.
The Illinois family?
No, our family.
ILL.
Not I. I think it's the Sanders family. I think it's Deion, and I think it's his son Shedeur Sanders, because
Ain't wrong.
I mean, you look at him, the QB. I think he just signed a deal with Nike. Now, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago. Like, he's going to become the face, or he's going to become the face of college football, in my opinion, because he's projected to be potentially the first quarterback off the board this season. And Deion's always going to make headlines, even if sometimes not in the right way, as he did yesterday. But Deion Sanders is always going to be a guy that the media, the public, are always going to kind of float towards. I mean, there's a ton of, I can't believe I saw on social media today that football game they're playing today, where they're taking on, I think it's like North Dakota, an FCS school, who will give them a decent fight in this game tonight.
Yeah, they won't be the face of it when they lose later on tonight.
It's a game that's getting significant betting money placed on it. And I don't think it's just because it's like, oh, North Dakota State, that's a team people think can upset Colorado. No, it's the Deion effect, you know?
Yeah.
It's the Deion Sanders effect. It's the Sanders family effect.
Well, and it makes it bigger,
they're
too.
The face of college football.
It makes it, too, because his son is potentially going to be a top pick in the draft this year, mostly because it's just a light draft crop of players when it comes to quarterbacks. But it makes it even bigger this season. So then let me ask you this. After his son graduates from the college side and gets drafted into the NFL, are they still the face? Like, are we talking about just a one-year face of college football? Because that's why I would go to Kirby Smart, because the other part of me was like,
what do you see Kirby? This would be my counter to Kirby. What do you see Kirby Smart in? Like, when I think Nick Saban, Aflac commercials. He just had a Verbo commercial the other day that was pretty funny that got released.
Of course he does.
Everybody talked about the Alabama football program. We talk about the Georgia football program. I never see Kirby Smart doing anything. Like, have you ever seen Kirby Smart in a commercial? Is there one that I am forgetting about? And that's why I say, like, when I think face of college football, you've got to be out there. And Kirby Smart's not out there. And typically when he is talking about his Georgia football program, it's about how the Georgia players are speeding all the damn time. So I don't know if that's good publicity for him.
Publicity. So any publicity is good publicity.
So that's why I would say it's the Sanders family. Now, to your point of, like, does that lasting effect happen when his son goes to the NFL? Maybe not, but I think if Deion stays in Colorado, Deion's always going to pull headlines in because it's Deion Sanders. So I think they have become the face of college football. Whether that's good or bad, I don't really know.
Is that bad? Because I personally feel like a player should be the face of college football. And I know that can't last because obviously the players move on. They go to the NFL. They stop playing college football and you get a new player. But it just feels like the excitement is more when a player is the face of college football, no?
That's a good question.
I guess if you can hate watch Deion Sanders, if you don't like Deion Sanders, it makes a villain. But your team technically doesn't see Colorado that often.
Yeah, it's funny because I would actually take the side of it's probably better for college football if the face of the game is a coach.
Yeah.
Because they're there longer, to your point. Like a college football player, if you have like Tim Tebow, for example, he was probably the face of college football. I think I was young when he was with the Gators. But he was there for, 3 years, 4 years?
I think it was 4.
It was a 4-year run. And, look, it's a pretty good run. With a coach like Nick Saban, Saban has been the talk of college football for, a decade plus almost as kind of the face of football. And, look, there were guys that kind of contended with that, like Urban Meyer when he was at Ohio State kind of had a little bit of that to him. But Dabo Swinney had that a little bit when they were on their run at Clemson. But I would say it's probably better if it is a coach. But I just don't know if you've got those big name. You've got some big name coaches. They just don't have that kind of star power to him. I would say, like Kirby Smart, he's a great head coach. He's probably he is the best head coach in college football, but he's not out there. Someone
texted in and said Dan Lanning is more of it than Kirby Smart is.
But I don't know if he's out there.
I don't think he is either, and I think he could be, but I mean, he doesn't seem like the type of guy. Like the way you get to Nick Saban level is winning consistently, which is why I would bring up Kirby Smart, because he's winning like Nick Saban was. The way you get to Deion Sanders level is that you are out there and you are aggressive with it and people talk about it nonstop. And I don't think you have a college football coach that is that way.
Yeah, I would agree with that because like Dan Lanning, not really out there to the media. One that is kind of out there and talks to me, but he doesn't do any this is the thing is like what made Nick Saban different was he was like in commercials. He was on Affleck. Well, he's still coaching. He had it was a long time ago, but he had the classic one of believing in superstitions where he drops the cookie on the ground and then he picks it up and eats it. I can't remember what those things are called, but
I know what you're talking about.
But he was on all these commercials for it. To your point, like there's not a lot of coaches that are really that outside of Deion. I mean, Deion's the one who's on the Affleck one with
it's hard to outdo Deion Sanders and Nick Saban.
Yeah,
so.
and like Kirby's not really out there aggressively on commercials.
Someone said Dabo Swinney. Dabo was there for 2 years.
But even when Dabo had his run with Clemson,
it was more Nick Saban than Dabo Swinney.
Now you get the quotes from Dabo ripping on NIL. Like he makes another one of those guys that makes more headlines that he probably doesn't want to be making.
Yeah, he'll be gone before it really becomes that big of a thing.
And Lane Kiffin, he's out there. You get good quotes from him, but is Lane Kiffin in commercials either? No. I don't think so, unless there's something that I'm missing.
Yeah, you're right.
And Harbaugh was kind of a face for college football the last couple of years, just because his seat was on fire. There was a lot of talk in Michigan that he wasn't getting the job done. Do they need to fire him? He'd get to the playoff. He wouldn't have success. And, of course, last year you have all the scandals that are going on and he's more in the headlines just because he was ready to leave Michigan because he was about to be suspended for the stuff that was going on in his program.
Yeah. So let's shift over to Mizzou and Illinois, both in action tonight. Mizzou taking on Murray State, Illinois taking on Eastern Illinois, which I think is probably should be a little bit more concerned about that matchup than Mizzou versus Murray State. But are you watching for anything? Can you learn anything in either of these games tonight?
Yeah, I think for Missouri, and look, these games are going to be blowouts. Let's just call it what it is.
We hope.
Yeah.
The only blowout that Illinois might see is Eastern Illinois blowing them out of the water. If
we have to come on here and say that there are major lessons we learned from tonight's games, it's probably a bad thing for any one of these programs. The thing I'm going to be watching for is just the backfield for the Missouri Tigers tonight, because you're going to see Nate Noel, you're going to see Marcus Carroll, the two transfers, Noel from App State, Georgia State for Carroll. Those are kind of the guys that we expect. One of those two will ultimately kind of take on the Cody Schrader role and be the lead running back for the Missouri Tigers. I think that's the one that I'm going to be watching for. But even then, we were talking about this in the office, this is one of those games where the Missouri O-line is going to just dominate Murray State. Yeah. They were one of the worst FCS programs last year, did not have a very good year, had to replace a ton of players. If they don't, they're going to dominate, so it's going to be a little tougher to evaluate the running backs. It's just... The main thing from this is take care of business, win by 30-plus points, and hopefully you get to see some of these running backs and go, okay, I like some of the explosiveness that we've seen, maybe some of the younger wide receivers that are in the depth chart. It's going to be tough, though, to learn anything of significance that's not bad from today's game.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at as well. I mean, if we're talking about Mizzou tomorrow, I think it's a bad talking about them. It's going to be more of good. They got the job done. Let's go on to the next week. I am going to be curious about the running game, though. And I know it's Murray State, and there's really not as competitive as you would think. But I am going to be curious how they utilize them, the game plans that they have with them, and what it looks like, because that's going to be such a massive element for this Mizzou team for the upcoming season. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, we dive into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN.
Let's open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trashed wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
let's get into the junk drawer today. T-Bone, what do you got?
All right, I saw this story, and I was like, okay, I want to know what Alex Ferrario's reaction would be if this happened. How old is your oldest, by the way?
She's 3.
Okay.
Yeah, 3.5.
I remember she was, okay, I thought maybe she'd be
March
getting
is her
close to
birthday,
4.
so she'll be 4 in March.
So,
which, God, we are, for anybody out there who has 2 or 3-year-olds, we are praying. You never want to pray time away with your children, and I love my children, but I'm praying to get to age 4 because I've heard they just chill the bleep out. And right now, we are in the midst of it. It is like a storm with this one.
Terrible 3s.
Yeah. No, well, it's terrible 2s. That's what they tell you. I don't think 2 is anything near 3. Anyway, we're just trying to get to 4 right now.
So the reason I asked that was because there was a headline yesterday of this family. They decided to go to this museum, and they're touring this museum, and there's this 3,500-year-old kind of jar that dates all the way back to the Bronze Age.
Oh, God, I know where this is going, and I'm already having an anxiety attack.
2200, 1500 BC. And, well, they had their curious little 4-year-old with them who, according to the father, said, quote, he pulled the jar slightly because he was curious what was inside.
Oh, my God.
And he tugged this 3,500-year-old jar down to the ground, and it broke in the museum.
Oh, my God. First of all, I don't blame the kid. I blame the parents. Don't take your kid to a museum like that. Don't take a 3-year-old there. Like that's like me taking my 3-year-old to the art museum. I'm not going to do that because she's going to be loud, and it's a quiet place that echoes, and there is a lot of expensive stuff around. I'm not going to take my kid into an expensive museum, building, store if I don't trust her.
I kind of blame the museum, though.
Yeah,
if it's that valuable.
Is it for kids, though? Is it a museum for kids? Or
adults sometimes can be just as bad.
You aren't wrong there, but at least the adult knows what they're doing and they can get in trouble for it. Like, I can't blame a kid.
But if it's that valuable, it should not be able to be touched. Like, it should be away, like in a case.
So this is what the museum said, because they were asked about that. About, okay, why is this not, behind glass? Why is it somewhere where it can't be touched? The museum said, quote, the artifact was not encased in glass or additional protection because of its belief that people should enjoy this historical item without obstruction. Which, I can kind of get that to an extent, but I'm kind of with you. Taking a 4-year-old to that kind of museum.
I just there's certain places I won't take my.
I'm 25 now. Don't take me to a museum.
Well,
I'm not going to break
for different
anything.
reasons.
I'm not going to break anything. If a 4-year-old's born,
but
T-Bone's going to be kind of bored.
And again, this is just my parent mentality. There might be other parents that think that's good. It's an educational opportunity to take in places. More power to you. I know how I am, and I will panic the entire time because I don't trust my 3-year-old to be able to withhold the ability to walk over that and grab that and touch that, because my 3-year-old loves to touch everything.
Do you have that? Like, you go grocery shopping with them every now and then, right?
Yeah, and she walks around
with stuff.
I have to make sure she doesn't shoplift. Because what we do is she walks around and she puts stuff in the cart that I'm not looking at. Yeah. And I'd be like, whoa. The last time we went, she had a book bag and she was putting groceries in her book bag. But I tell her, I said, you get to grocery shop with Daddy. I'm going to go get this. You go get that. She'll walk around and she'll put stuff in her book bag. And I'm like, whoa. So this gives me anxiety, which is why I don't take my kids to those places. I take my kids places where they can't break anything. And if they do, it's not going to be something that's as important as a 35,000-year-old jar.
It's one thing if it's a glass at a restaurant, for example. Like, you knock over a cup or they grab a plate that you're not paying attention to and it goes to the ground and boom, it breaks. Whew, I would hate to. Now, granted, to the museum's credit, they think they can restore the vase. How, I don't really know. But
say, really?
They think they can restore it, and they invited the family back for a tour because they didn't want hard feelings. It's a 4-year-old,
It's a private tour. They're going to have 2 security guards with the 4-year-old.
Just put handcuffs on the child.
Oh, gosh.
If a 4-year-old with 2 security guards, don't touch that. Don't touch that. It's essentially what I do when I go anywhere with them. I am getting a ton of texts on the Air Comfort Service text line right now saying, Alex, 4-year-olds are worse than 3-year-olds.
Oh, man.
I also see a couple saying they wish they could go back to when they were that young.
I have been misinformed.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't. It's just she's at that stage where she doesn't understand. Like her brain doesn't understand, I can't do that. She's testing boundaries, which is what 3-year-olds do. I also don't have the brain capacity to work with a 3-year-old who tries to push boundaries. Because when you push boundaries with me, I get angry. And so I have to leave rooms very often. She has to leave rooms very often. We've taught her to, express your emotions. When you're mad, let mommy and daddy know. And we want her to. We want her to cry. We want her to yell. The problem is when she expresses her emotion, she's got daddy's anger. And typically, like this morning's a perfect example. She had a balloon that they got for daddy for his birthday. She wanted to give it to me. Her sister wanted to give it to me. So her sister ripped it from her hands. That pissed Adelaide off. And so what Adelaide went on to do was pick up their little mini table. She picked up the chair and chucked it across the kitchen. Yeah. And then she just stomped and she does the whole arms.
I think you've done that in the studio.
Oh, I've done that multiple times in this studio. So, I can't blame her.
I didn't know there was a thing for this. Fornado is what it's called.
Oh, God.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, because it's terrible 2s and 3-nagers, and I've heard 4 they start to calm down a little bit.
I didn't know there was a nickname for that. Honestly, I thought 4, 5, and 6 was when it kind of got easier.
Someone said 4-year-olds act like BK. Well, then I'm actually going to be a pro when it comes to working with a 4-year-old. That's going to be no problem at all.
They're going to have tone issues.
Yeah, they already got tone issues. So apparently BK's the equivalent of a 3-year-old. With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up at 15, it's everybody's favorite segment on a Thursday, believe it or not. That means Grant has to sing once again. But coming up next, are we seeing Victor Scott find his footing at the big league level? We'll discuss that and one role that Matthew Liberatore has mastered. All of that next here on 101 ESPN.
ESPN.
With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Cardinals getting underway for the series finale against the Padres. The opportunity to either split the series or lose through of 3 of 4 to the San Diego Padres, and then they head out to New York to take on the Yankees. But what we have seen are some positive signs in certain areas for the Cardinals, and one of those signs is Victor Scott and what you're seeing him develop at the big league level. At the beginning of the season, we all can agree, it looked bad. I mean, the guy was hitting .085 with an OPS of 274. You had him have, a total of 5 hits in the amount of at-bats that he had from March 28th up until June 20th. But what we've seen from Victor Scott since August 5th when he was recalled is a different player. You see a different approach at the plate, which we've learned since then that he's worked with Ryan Ludwig on that one. We've seen some pop from Victor Scott, and of course we've seen the elite defense in center field. Here's his number since he's been recalled. He's had a total of 66 plate appearances, 4 doubles, 2 home runs, 3 walks, 21 strikeouts. He's also had 3 stolen bases, but he's got a batting average of .238 with a slash line of .273, .397, and an OPS of .670. I don't know about you, T-Bone, but to me, that's a big leaguer. Is it pretty as a big leaguer? No, but that's the same signs of life that Mason Wynn had last year at the end of season where you were like, okay, this guy can play. This guy can perform, and now you give him a little bit of runway. And going back to what we talked about in the 11 o'clock hour, this is why I'd like to see the Cardinals waive Tommy Pham. Because Victor Scott does not deserve to go back down to Memphis. Victor Scott does not deserve to be a 4th outfielder. Victor Scott deserves to play center field for the rest of the season because, like it or not, I believe the Cardinals are viewing this guy as your starting center fielder next year, and that's what's best for this team is to have him be your starting center fielder next year because he's finding his footing.
Yeah, I think he looks better than what Mason Wynn looked like in terms of how he's looked since he's been recalled than what Mason Wynn looked like when he got called up last year. Because Mason Wynn, when he was called up last year, it was clear early on he was overmatched. And you saw that with Victor Scott in his first call-up. You know, Victor Scott was outmatched in his first call-up. They sent him down. He works on some things. And last week, I even questioned, like, okay, is it better for him to be up here at the Big League Club because he's up here because more of a need than anything else? No, he's finding his footing, I think. I think he's kind of starting to find a little bit of a rhythm. Now, look, it's not sexy offensive numbers. A .238 average isn't great. A .670 OPS isn't something to write home about. It's like 15% below league average. But he's doing enough to where when he does get on base, he's creating a little bit offensively. He's got 3 stolen bases since he's been recalled, which leads the team. He's also got a .670 OPS, which we mentioned, which is higher than what Michael Ciani's OPS has been so far this season. And I think that's where the conversation is going to be for the Cardinals when Ciani comes back potentially next week is, okay, who do we start in center field and what do we do with Victor Scott if we decide to start Michael Ciani? Because I don't think the decision with Victor Scott is tied to Tommy Pham. Tommy Pham's a corner outfielder, hasn't played any center field here, so I don't think that impacts any playing time for him. I think it comes down to what the choice is with Michael Ciani. And right now, I think it's more valuable for Victor Scott to be getting these reps here at the big leagues because you're seeing some offensive improvement. You're seeing his defense is playing kind of like what Ciani's did when he was up here and healthy. So I'm seeing positive signs from Victor Scott to where I think when Ciani comes back, you just stick with Victor Scott as your starter. Ciani kind of sits the bench, comes in late as a defensive replacement. And then in the offseason, you can kind of figure out, or not in the offseason, excuse me, when you get to training, spring training of next year, now you've got a competition for that center field job. Who's going to take it, Ciani or Scott? And whoever does gets to be the starter. Whoever doesn't probably is either the 4th outfielder or starts the season in AAA.
Yeah, from the 3.86, did everyone just forget what Ciani has done this season? No, I didn't forget it at all. But I legitimately ask this question, who is your future? Is your future Michael Ciani or is it Victor Scott? Because to me, Michael Ciani, great outfielder, and you know what? He filled a void for you that you couldn't fill when Tommy Edman was injured and Victor Scott wasn't ready for the big leagues. He came in, he hit, and he also gave you gold glove defense. But he's not a part of the future. Is Michael Ciani going to be your center fielder for the next 8 years? No. Victor Scott is going to be your center fielder for the next 8 years. And Michael Ciani this season was hitting .256 in 101 plate appearances with a .622 OPS. Again, in 66 plate appearances for Victor Scott, the batting average isn't as good. It's sitting at .238, but he's got a much better OPS at .670. and he's still giving you elite defense in center field. So I didn't forget what Michael Ciani offered you. In fact, there's a place for Michael Ciani on this team, and it's what Tebow mentioned. You got a late inning helper to come off of the bench and play defense for you if you have to pull, say, a Lars Nootbaar, Jordan Walker, Alec Burleson out so you can win games thanks to your defense. Ciani can play a corner outfield position for you. He can play it, and he can excel at it. But what doesn't need to happen is the Cardinals say what this texter is saying. Well, did we all forget what Michael Ciani did? Victor Scott needs to go back to Memphis and continue to work. No, I'm done with that. He's showing you he can hit at the major league level. He can adjust to major league pitching, and I'm going to throw him out there so that he can continue to work, go into the offseason, and plan next year to win the position against Michael Ciani. And it's still great to have another Gold Glove center fielder on your bench.
Yeah, to your point on the future, I think Victor Scott's the one that's got some upside because you saw flashes of it in the minor leagues prior to his stint with AAA. The other thing I would tell you, too, is, I'm not forgetting what Michael Ciani has done, but his role in the big leagues is probably kind of a stopgap starting center fielder for a team. And if we're being honest, I think he probably overexceeded expectations offensively as to what he was providing for the Cardinals. But maybe even capitalize on what he's done if he brings some trade value and you trade him for another bullpen arm.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when people were upset about the Richie Palacios trade. They traded Richie Palacios in the offseason, and there was no denying he was really good for the Cardinals in that final month last year. They got Andrew Kittredge, who's been pretty good for the Cardinals in that deal. And you look at Palacios' numbers, and he's not the same guy that you saw in that month stretch last year. He finished last year in 32 games with the Cardinals, an 823 OPS. Richie Palacios now has a 682 OPS and is 2% below league average. And now he's on the IL, but he was playing for the most part for the Rays. Like some of the guys you just need to capitalize when their values reach their peak. And I think the Cardinals need to do a little bit better job of that with some of their prospects that they hold on to for too long, a.k.a. Carlson, a.k.a. Tyler O'Neill. But I think when you look at Michael Ciani, he's another one of those where, hey, you know what? He might be a guy that gets Wally Pitt because of his injury. Would have been probably the starting center fielder for the entirety of the season, but he's just not a guy that's going to have, to your point, he's not the guy of the future.
Yeah.
Victor Scott is the guy that you hope becomes the future center fielder.
Well, and the same texter is chiming back in and say, why can't Ciani be your next center fielder for the next 8 years? I'm not saying he can't, but the reason why he shouldn't be? Go back and look at Victor Scott's numbers in terms of stolen bases when he was in AAA. 94 stolen bases last year between AA and A ball. That's why Victor Scott is your center fielder for the next 8+ years.
And if you look at Victor Scott's minor league numbers, and I know people don't necessarily want to hear about, what's he doing in the minors? Who cares? I want to see what he does at the big league level. The reason that the Cardinals would say Scott is higher up on their list of guys of hey, who takes over kind of the role as the starting center fielder is last year, double A for Victor Scott. 323 average, a 370 on base, a 450 slug. That's an 800 OPS.
Yeah.
Little pop in the bat, 7 home runs. When you look at Michael Ciani, last year spent most of AAA with the Cincinnati Reds, didn't even have a 700 OPS at AAA.
You've seen what Michael Ciani's ceiling looks like. You haven't even touched what the ceiling of Victor Scott looks like.
I'm not even saying they should trade Ciani in the offseason.
No.
I just want to say, give the runway to Scott here in the stretch. And then, let's assess when we get to the offseason. Let's maybe assess when we go into spring training because there's a chance Victor Scott could regress back to the norm. He does have a big strikeout rate. You mentioned his strikeout since he's been back, 30% strikeout rate. Okay, maybe you hold on to Ciani because then he can also help with he takes another year as the starting center fielder going into next season. Yeah. While you go through this youth movement, Ciani's not that old either. He'll be 25 next year. And Victor Scott gets more seasoning in AAA because he's only had about half a season to do so far.
Well, and again, if you're not going to bring up Jordan Walker, which I don't expect them to do by the end of this season, play Ciani in a corner outfield spot. Let him continue to work there, see what the bat does, and then by next year you're talking about where is he going to compete. You're creating internal competition, which we've talked about with the Blues as a benefit. I think it's something that the Cardinals have lacked. Speaking of competition, there's another player that has been really impressive that finally the Cardinals realized what they needed and they used him in this role. It's Matthew Liberatore. Guys, Matthew Liberatore is your high-leverage left-handed reliever for the near future. So since August 2nd, and if you remember correctly, that last start that he had because they were in a bind and they needed a starter and Matthew Liberatore was the guy, since that last start on July 24th, these are his numbers coming out of the bullpen. 16 1/3 innings. He's given up 8 hits with 20 strikeouts and 4 walks. That's good for a .55 ERA. Teams are hitting 140 against him. Matthew Liberatore, and I think we both brought this guy up in the past. Like, you hope that Liberatore could become kind of what Andrew Miller was, to where you took him and you put him in the role or in the bullpen and he got to be a shutdown guy. I'm not saying that Liberatore is going to be what Andrew Miller was, because he was one of the best in Major League Baseball. But, like, you saw Jojo Romero give up a run yesterday, and it put the Cardinals in a bind where they blew another lead. Guys, Matthew Liberatore has been lights out for this team for an entire month, and even go beyond that. Before they were going back and forth with him, he was really good for you out of the bullpen. Next season, stop playing with Matthew Liberatore and acting like he's a starter. Put him in the high-leverage left-handed reliever role and save yourself some money so you're not bringing in guys that don't fit that role.
Yeah, having him in the bullpen just allows him to have success. And I know people will say, well, why is that? Why can't he work as a starter? Because they can pick the lanes that they use him in. Man, lefties have a 537 OPS against him this season.
Yeah.
That's 52% below league average. Meanwhile, right-handers have a 789 OPS and are 23% above league average against him. So that's why he's able to have success out of the bullpen, is you can just plan for things better. And it's funny, like, you look at his, like, month-by-month stretches, you know, because when I looked up his numbers last night, because when he came into the game and he had a good outing and he got a rise out who nobody else could do, I was like, man, I feel like, you know, has Libby been good this month? I feel like I've seen him a lot. What are his numbers? And like you mentioned, you read off those numbers at 5.55 ERA. He's been incredible this month. And so I started looking into, like, okay, why do I feel like I've missed out? Like, am I missing something? Why did I not notice this earlier? And it's because, like, you look at his game numbers through months, April, March, 2.93 ERA. Well, you know what? He didn't make a start that month. Yep. Well, then what happens in May? He has a 7.43 ERA. He made 3 starts that month. Yep. June has a 1.72, only made 2 starts that month. And then in July, had 1 start where he got roughed around a bit, inflated the ERA up to 11. And then this month, hasn't started a game, and he's got this incredible ERA. He's just a guy that can be in your bullpen. He's got a little swing and miss to his game, but it's a guy that you feel comfortable that you can also turn to for multiple innings if you need to. Not as necessarily a start, but you can get 2 innings if you're kind of in a bind, which we've seen, and you feel a little comfortable with that. But you feel really good when he goes up against left-handers, and that's why I'm with you. I think next season, maybe even here in the back half here in the final month, I don't know if it's I would no longer be going, and JoJo's been good. He had another one of those blip on the radar. I'd be kind of splitting it with those two. I would go JoJo and I would go Matthew Liberatore as kind of the 2 high leverage left-handed arms and really start to push Libby and see, okay, how do you handle it now in a bigger situation? What if it is the 8th inning of a 1-run game and it is the heart of the order that's coming back up? I want to see him get a little bit more opportunities kind of in that high leverage role.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of positives throughout the season, but you are seeing growth in certain areas that can benefit this team next year. It's just continuing to capitalize on that, i.e. bring up more of the younger players and put them in roles to succeed. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, believe it or not, here on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Rhino Shield. When it comes to your exterior, you need the best. And when I say the best, that means don't just use paint. Back when we purchased our home in 2020, I was going to do it. I was going to paint it myself because I'm thinking, well, this will be easy. I don't have to pay anybody. It's just the front of my house. It's brick. Shouldn't be a problem. And man, am I glad I talked to Darren over at Rhino Shield, because I didn't realize that paint deteriorates quickly. All of the rain that you get, when we get all of the water in the spring and in the fall, you get the snow, that is going to deteriorate it. Rhino Shield's work, it's 100% waterproof. All of the hot UV rays from the sun during the summertime, it's 95% protected with Rhino Shield compared to paint. It is all backed by a 25-year transferable warranty. And it doesn't matter what type of siding you have, Rhino Shield will stick to it. It's a 2 to 3 ceramic coating system that sticks 8 to 10 times thicker than any other paint you're going to use. So give Darren a call today. Tell him Alex Ferrario sent you and get the coating of a Rhino on the exterior of your home. 877-25-RHINO, 877-25rhino.com. I think we've had this like 5 straight weeks with Grant doing Believe It or Not with us.
I think BK just takes these days off for this reason.
He wants to hear Grant sing. He loves those tones.
That's probably what it is, actually.
All right, boys, here we go.
For all the empty seats at Buch, believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so
Free, flying away on a wing and a prayer.
Oh, who could it be?
Believe it or not, it's just me.
I am sorry, but I think Grant just nailed that without BK.
Did too. I thought that was great. I still can't get over the fact that the first, 3 weeks ago, the first time BK was out on a Thursday.
I'm just telling you, man.
It took a
He
couple
wouldn't
weeks,
sing. I know.
but we're there.
Believe it or not, when you take vacations, you just got back from New York, you listen to this song on repeat,
he did, for
and just try
sure.
and nail it.
No, but I have listened to it in the car for the sole reason of making sure I know the words.
Grant is just on fire right now.
I came
Grant feels like
prepared.
the guy that, when he does mess up, would hit the back button and just start over
Yeah,
again.
he's like,
Yes.
damn, it's not good enough. Let's do it again.
That's exactly what happens.
I like the commitment. 314-399-9646 is our Air Comfort Service text line. Also, our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. The Graveyard is where you could hop in on the chat and give us a scenario. We will tell you if we believe it or not. This one from the 847, Ferrario sucks. I'm not going to believe that one. Guys,
believe it.
Whoa, man. Guys, believe it or not, the Edmonton Oilers will not win a Stanley Cup while Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are a part of the team.
Believe it. I don't think Leon Draisaitl will be there if they were to win a Stanley Cup. They've got to get their goaltender, and they haven't.
Yep.
Their forwards are pretty well set. Their defense and their goaltending still isn't there. Maybe if they're able to, sign Draisaitl long term, and obviously they're going to lock McDavid up. They have him, but if they are not going to change their mindset of how they're going to win a Stanley Cup, if they're going to go all in on offense continually, then no, they're not going to win one.
Yeah, I'm not going to believe it either. I think last year was the year. And if you didn't win it last year, it's going to be so hard to get back. And especially now you're going to get close to another Draisaitl's one that's up at the end of this year, right?
Yep.
Draisaitl's got to get paid. McDavid's got to get paid right after that. I'm not going to believe it.
They don't feel like a Tampa Bay Lightning to me. They feel like a one-off. They feel like a one-hit wonder to me, and last year was their chance.
So this is the year that they have to win it. Otherwise, it's done. I think last year was what the Florida Panthers year prior to winning the Stanley Cup was. Got there, got a taste of it. They loaded up this year. They brought in Jeff Skinner. They brought in Victor Arvidsson. I know they lost Philip Broberg to the Blues and Dylan Holloway, but I do think they're going to spend that cap space. Kane will be the guy that comes back late. This is their year. And I don't believe they're going to win it this year, and I think everything unravels after this year. I think Draisaitl or Bouchard doesn't sign the contract that Edmonton wants them to, and then they're not sure how to handle it, and they never find their goaltender. So I am going to believe this as well. T-Bone?
Guys, believe it or not, we will see at least one new manager in the NL Central next season.
So the Cubs won't go anywhere.
Brewers won't go anywhere.
Brewers won't go anywhere. Pirates won't go anywhere. I'm going to believe this because I think it's going to come down to the Cincinnati Reds or the Cardinals. And I don't believe the Cardinals will do anything because Mo will be here. I do think Cincinnati goes a different route. I think they've been good, but now they need to take the next step. And I don't know if the manager's the problem, just like I don't know if the manager's the problem in St. Louis. But I'm going to believe this. One of the Reds or the Cardinals will have a new manager next year.
I'm not going to believe it because, as you said, I don't think the Cardinals are going to do anything. And for the Reds, are they really trying to compete to make the playoffs right now? Like, was that the goal for them this season?
Yeah, they thought they would be a playoff contender. They thought they could win the Central.
They had a lot of young players.
They have Ellie De La Cruz, but outside of that, and I'm not.
Cardinals, young guys took some steps back.
Yeah.
I think,
And injuries. They had a lot more guys that were injured throughout the year.
but when you
Guy
have
was juicing.
when you have young guys, I feel like they'll still give one more year.
Yeah.
I will believe this, and I actually think it's probably the Pirates are the ones that make the
Really?
change.
You think they go away from Shelton?
I think Shelton's on the hot seat.
Makes sense. I mean,
because
you were there for a while.
I don't understand how the owner got to this point, but I can remember like in early July, late June, I was listening to MLB Network radio, and they kept saying like, "Hey, the ownership of the Pirates is ready to win." And I went, "Well, their actions don't show it."
Sure.
That sounds
But
like a duck right there.
I was like, so if they're ready to win, and then they just had this trade deadline, and they've collapsed, like there's a fair argument to make that move. They've collapsed just like the Cardinals collapsed in the second half. I think there's a chance Derek Shelton could be fired. I could see Brian Price as well. I think they're going to look at it and say, you know what, we underestimated what we had here. I think if of the three teams that we mentioned, if I had to rank them, it would be Pirates 1, Reds 2, Cardinals 3.
Grant?
So we were talking about the Jamar Chase situation earlier in the Bengals. Believe it or not, the Bengals will finish last in the AFC North again this year.
Ooh. I'm not going to believe this one because despite their bad vibes, you will still have Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow is going to be effective for them. I think the Steelers are the team that finishes last. And then I depending on what happens with the Browns, I mean, Chubb's going to be out for, 4 to 6 weeks, maybe more. I think your top two are going to be the Ravens and Bengals, and then the Browns and Steelers are going to battle for the bottom spot.
Yeah, I'm not going to believe it. I think they'll get it figured out with the vibes thing and finish either first or second in that division. I think it's Cleveland or Pittsburgh that's going to be last. And if I had to put money on it, it'd be Pittsburgh, just because I think their offense is going to end up being terrible with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. So I'm not going to believe this. I don't think they will finish last again.
I have more faith in the Steelers offense. I
know, buddy.
With Joe Burrow coming back.
You need a hug.
You watch.
I just never knew that you were a big Steelers fan. You better, when we do our fantasy draft, you better draft Russell Wilson.
Well, I'm not that confident.
Yeah.
I'm not that confident. But no, I don't think they're going to finish last. I'm not going to believe it. It probably will be one of the Browns or the Steelers. I'm leaning more towards Browns
because the Browns are a disaster.
I think the Steelers are going to end up sneaking into that final wild card, but I think the Bengals will be a little higher.
All right, guys, believe it or not, off of our Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. Believe it or not, Cardinals won't win a division title in the next 5 years.
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm going to believe this one. I think everyone around you in the NL Central is getting better. I think Milwaukee's probably going to be superior for the next couple of years. And then I think it's going to be a battle between the Reds and the Pirates. And if the Cubs, although the Cubs now are trying to cut money because they've spent so much, I don't see you winning the division title for the next 5 years.
I won't believe it, but I could see where it happened. And the reason I'm not going to believe it is I think at some point Milwaukee will take a step back. I still can't believe they're this good. The Reds, they're going to have to spend money, and until they do it, I'm not going to believe in them. Same with the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Cubs, that organization, they suck.
Yeah, they're cutting money more than the Cardinals are.
Yeah, they have no pipeline. They're kind of stuck in the middle. They don't really know what to do with their roster. They just spend a ton of money on Craig Counsell, who I still think is a good manager. But again, like we've talked about, there's like maybe 5 managers make an impact on a baseball game. Clearly, Craig Counsell wasn't one of them that they thought. So I'm not going to believe it. I could see where maybe the Cardinals win one division title in the NL Central over the next 5 years. It could be one of those they back into, but it could happen.
From the 636, believe it or not, Letty, Falk, or Krug, one of those three will be traded by this year's deadline.
Letty, Falk, or Krug. Oh.
That's a good one.
I don't think Letty's not going to be traded.
I think it's more of an off-season thing.
Interesting. You don't think Letty?
No, Letty's going to be here. I think Falk will be here.
I don't think they can trade Falk. That's the reason I say that. Same with Krug.
If Falk has a bounce back, they could. But if Falk has
not in year though. What?
Not in year. But I also don't believe you trade Falk if he has a bounce back because you hope he's top 4. You don't trade Falk until Matt Kessel is ready to be a top 4 or somebody else comes through the pipeline. I think Falk is the placeholder for Juracek, and I think Letty's the placeholder for Theo Lindstein. And I think once those guys are ready, that's when you see those guys go their separate ways. The guy that could get traded is Torrey Krug, but I don't think that's getting traded at the trade deadline. If that gets moved, it's in the offseason, and I just don't know. Until we get an update from Doug Armstrong on his health, I don't see him going anywhere.
Yeah, I think there's too many difficulties of the situation when you're talking about at the trade deadline. Once the no trade clauses become modified no trade clauses in the offseason, that's why I think it's an offseason thing, because then it'll be a little easier. But as it sits right now, like if you're going to try to trade these guys, you're basically you got a couple options, and it narrows what the return can be for these players. And I don't see Doug Armstrong trading one of these players when the player has that much control and the return's not going to be much because there's not going to be many teams involved in the trade.
I won't believe it either. The one that I thought maybe draws interest is Letty, but it's twofold. One, there's another year on the contract, if I'm not mistaken. So you don't eat money on that deal because then you got to eat money into next year. And two, though I don't think the Blues are a playoff team, I can see where they're hanging around the deadline, maybe do a small addition, maybe just kind of hold on to the pieces like they did this past offseason. I don't know if they're going to be bad enough to where they just completely look to sell Nick Letty. And if that's the case, if he has another good year, you just wait till the offseason to make that move.
Well, and to me, too, I don't find Nick Letty to be a problem. I mean, at $4 million
I don't either,
a year.
but I think it's one of those where it's, you can probably get something in return for that asset. Somebody would pay for a Nick Leddy to come in on a contender, I would think, play second or third pairing for them for $4 million.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But I mean, if I'm looking at trying to improve the Blues, Krug and Falk are the two because of the contract, and the play on the ice doesn't match the contract at this point. Those are the two for me that you could actually improve the team. But Nick Leddy, I mean, even if you don't want him to be your top pairing defenseman, you slide him down to the second or third pairing. He's good at $4 million a year in that scenario.
For me, it's more of, can I collect an asset that I can later potentially flip for a guy that, let's be honest, is Leddy here after his contract is up? No, my answer is probably not. So if that's the case, he becomes a guy that, it's not, am I trying to improve the team by that trade? It's more of asset management, capitalizing while there's some value there, bring something in and potentially look to move. And again, I'm not saying that they have to do it. I'm just saying,
BK.
I'm open-minded to the idea. He's like my Ivan Barbashev.
Whoa!
I'm open-minded to the idea of a move.
I don't think you move Nick Leddy until you have somebody that can fill that spot for you. The hope is Broberg next year takes his spot as the top pair. I don't think you move Leddy until Lindstein is ready to be an everyday defenseman, and I don't know how long that's going to take. And I think because he's got next year will be his final year as a Blue. Yes. If I'm not mistaken, I think next year at the trade deadline is when you potentially trade him if you've got the guys up in the system ready to go. And if not, then you might be holding on to that until you get more guys ready to kind of chug into those positions for the Blues. Speaking of the Blues, Doug Armstrong, who was on the fast lane yesterday, had a really interesting comment about the players that are going to carry this team through this retool. And I do think that sets the expectation for this upcoming season. We'll discuss next here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Nolan Arenado walked it off for the Cardinals last night as they took a win from the Padres 4-3. They look to split that series tonight at this game 4 of 4 at Buch Stadium against the Padres. It'll be Sonny Gray getting the start for the Cardinals, going against Michael King for the Padres, and first pitch is underway, and it is no score in the second inning. It was 1 out in that second inning so far. And tonight, the college football season gets underway for Mizzou and Illinois. For Mizzou, it'll be going up against Murray State. Kickoff will be at 7 o'clock, and then 8 o'clock for the Illini as they host Eastern Illinois. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
So that's Doug Armstrong, who was on the Fast Lane yesterday. If you missed that interview, you can go check it out up on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. All podcasts brought to you by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. And alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. And that was the quote that really stuck out to me during Doug Armstrong's interview. And look, I understand the excitement, and for a lot of people, that might not surprise you, him saying that Kyrou, Thomas, Buch are the guys that are going to be driving this team's success, and if they have no success, it's going to be because of these guys. But the reason that stuck out to me is because I don't think he was just saying for this season. I think he was saying for the long term of this team. Because if you go back to the previous window that the Blues were in, that success was coming with guys like Alex Pietrangelo, Alexander Steen, Colton Parayko. The players that they had in place, that was who was driving the success, and then everything else around it was how you built a roster. And it ties into the Corey Pronman piece talking about the pipeline for the Blues, although I do think he was a little bit down on a team that I say their pipeline is a little bit better. The Blues don't have superstars coming through their pipeline. You might have different opinions on Dalibor Dvorsky, on Jimmy Snuggerud, on Zach Bolduc, on Theo Lindstein, but these guys aren't former first overall picks, former third overall picks. These are guys that are expected to be pieces to the puzzle, not the core piece of the roster. What Armstrong said is this team's success comes from Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas, and Pavel Buchnevich. Not just for now, but 4 years from now, 5 years from now. When all of these younger guys are ready to compete at the NHL level and be really good pieces, second, third line players, you're only going as far as Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, and Pavel Buchnevich take you, hence their $8 million contracts that they have. And if it doesn't go well, then that's where Doug Armstrong, I believe, has to look at it and say, okay, do our main pieces, are they the problem for our roster?
Yeah, the Robert Thomas one, Buchnevich and Kyrou, that doesn't surprise me for this year because we can kind of agree. There's some question marks as to what the bottom six will look like and if you're going to get depth of scoring from. I mean, yesterday we talked about how many Blues will have 15 goals. And, you know, if you get some more depth of scoring, it's going to improve your roster. But they are top-heavy. They do rely on Robert Thomas to be a number one centerman. Pavel Buchnevich is probably going to have to be the number two centerman this season, and Jordan Kyrou needs to be a 30-goal scorer for them. I think where it's interesting is if you look at that and kind of look at it in the long run of, hey, we need these guys to be kind of that core, the big three for us, we'll call it. They're the three guys that we're kind of building this, and the puzzle kind of starts with them, you know? We want them to be the guys that for the next 4 years we know what we're getting out of them, and then we can kind of start to implement some of this younger core, the Jimmy Snuggerud, the Dalibor Dvorsky, the Theo Lindstein on the defensive side of things. It's an interesting comment from Doug Armstrong because we've talked about Jordan Kyrou ad nauseum, and I think BK was right in terms of we haven't talked about him much this offseason, which is probably a good thing. It's them kind of starting to understand what they have in Jordan Kyrou. But it is interesting to hear him kind of in the same conversation that, hey, he probably is in this core for the long run. Some fans may not like to hear that, but I do think that's how the Blues are approaching it is here's what the three main pieces are for the next 6 years that we know of, and then we just got to piece it around them. And, you know, maybe Jake Neighbors kind of works his way into this conversation if he has another solid season. It isn't just a one-off for him, but you do have your 2 goalies in place. Now you've got the 3 guys you're building this forward group around. We know who the defenseman is in Colton Brayko. Now it's just trying to figure out, okay, what other puzzle pieces are missing for us to get back into contention.
I do think like you're putting these guys on notice, and you're putting them on notice for a reason, because the way that the Blues have always built is a pack mentality. And I think the pack mentality is how they went about this draft. You know, like, I think if the way that the way I heard it when Doug Armstrong was talking about is like, look, if these guys aren't the ones that carry us, we might have to go back into another retool. And I think JR put that in his piece as well, kind of breaking down Corey Pronman's pipeline, talking about the Blues, saying like, look, this might be more successful than what Pronman's giving them credit for. And if it's not, well, then there's bigger problems, because the Blues were drafting guys. Yes, you got 10th overall, but Bolduc and Snuggerud and Jake Neighbors, those were like 15 to 25. You know, you got Stenberg and Lindstein late in the first round. You got Juracek kind of in the middle of the draft. You're not bringing guys that are superstars in. You're going back to the pack mentality. Just like that pack mentality was when they won in 2018, 2019, yes, you had borderline stars in the NHL of Vladimir Tarasenko and Alex Pietrangelo, but you also won because of guys like Jaden Schwartz, because of guys like David Perron. It's going to have to be Thomas, Kyrou, and Buch do take on that larger role for this team. And I kind of point more to Kyrou and Thomas than Buch, because Buch feels like, although he got that contract extension, you're a little bit later in that window than what Thomas and Kyrou are. But these are the horses that they're riding on right now.
Yeah, Buch is the one that this year's not really, I don't think, going to be a good example of him being the guy that's for the future of the core. And what I mean by that is because he's going to be, I think, playing out of position, playing that number 2 center. He probably should be playing on their top line. It probably should be Buch, Kyrou, and Thomas. I think we agree. Maybe you want to go.
Mine's Buch, Thomas, Neighbors, and Kyrou's the second line.
Yeah, but he should be on your first line if you weren't in desperate need, of a number 2 center. It is interesting that if they do go this route of trying to build this pack mentality, if it works in the modern game again, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think you need a superstar to be a goal scorer, or a superstar on your team. Like, look at what the points are that are being put up by a Connor McDavid, by some of the guys that were on that Florida Panthers team. Now, that team was really deep. Like, they might be the team that... But I call them a different kind of version of pack mentality. If your pack mentality includes Matthew Tkachuk on the second line, that's a really good pack.
It's a good pack.
Like,
you've got an alpha dog in that pack. You don't have to worry about the rest.
That's a lot different than what the Blues kind of had built for their cup run.
And it wasn't just Matthew Tkachuk as the part of the pack. It was also Barkov, who's considered an elite player, and Sam Reinhart, who's considered an elite player. Like, you had 3 elite dudes playing a pack mentality. But I do think it plays into another quote that Doug Armstrong had, talking about what the expectations are for the Blues this season. Doug had an aggressive offseason, a very aggressive offseason. I think a lot of people are going to give him high grades for what he's done. But again, it goes back to Thomas, Kyrou, and Buch. And he's basically saying what he said last year. Got to be a playoff team. And I think Doug's going to be looking at this as there has to be improvement. Maybe not in points, but you have to be an improved team in terms of your competitiveness on a night-to-night basis. And if you're not, well, guess where he's going to look first? He's going to look first at the guys that are leading this core of players moving forward.
Was it just me, or did that kind of quote sound like we need to be a playoff team?
It did.
Because I don't know if I feel that way, especially considering they're in a retool.
Apparently something just broke in the studio, and I don't know. All three of us just looked at each other like something broke or dropped a bowling ball.
I lost my train of thought because of what was going on.
No, but you're asking.
To the Armstrong quote there, to me it almost sounded like hey, we need to be a playoff team this year. And that's how it's viewed as a success. I don't necessarily feel that way. Don't get me wrong. They should be a team that does push for the playoffs because We all agree they look better on paper. So if these pieces kind of click together, I think the West did get a little bit better around them. They should still fight for the playoffs like they did last year, you know, and you hope you avoid those San Jose, Columbus losses, the embarrassing one that happened in Detroit. Like, you avoid those, you're probably right there in that playoff picture. But for me, I'm not judging this on, is it a success if we get to the playoffs? If they miss the playoffs, but I can look at it and go, man, they might have a number one defenseman, Philip Broberg.
Yeah.
Man, they probably, Jake Neighbors, that was another really good year. Oh, wow, that Dylan Holloway that they signed to a tender sheet, okay, they've got something there. I'm more judging it still on, okay, how do some of these guys develop? Not so much of where do they finish in the standings.
Yeah, I kind of felt that as well. I don't know if he was calling them out to make the playoffs, but if you become a team that is 6, 7, 8, 9 points out of a playoff spot, I think that in Doug Armstrong's eyes is a step backwards rather than a step forward, and that's where it feels like more pressure is put on this team and maybe more changes have to be taken care of. Hey, right now you've got your shot to win a pair of lawn tickets to Sammy Hagar's sold-out show on August 31st at Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. Sammy is going to be joined by Michael Anthony, Joe Satriani, and Jason Bonham for a huge sold-out show this Saturday. If you can be Texter 101, and in our junk drawer story, Tanner brought up an item that was broken at a museum by a child. How old was that item? If you can tell us right now, be Texter 101, you will win a free pair of tickets to see Sammy Hagar, 314-399-9646, or you can register to score those tickets to the sold-out show at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app. T-Bone, Grant, and I will be back to rewind it next here on 101 ESPN. sure you get signed up to play in this year's Fastlane Pick'em Challenge at 101ESPN.com. Make sure your football picks each week and see if you can defeat the Fastlane and the group at the Rizzuto Show, Fastlane and the Riz Show, throwing them down all football season long in the Pick'em Challenge. Get signed up to play now at 101ESPN.com. Speaking of the Fastlane, they were coming up today from 2 to 6 o'clock. Jamie Rivers, Anthony Stalter, and Andrew Marsh. They'll have you taken care of from 2 to 6 today. If you missed anything from our show, you can check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. As always, presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Along with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Guys, let's rewind it with the Cardinals' pending move today. Cardinals in action currently of the series finale against the San Diego Padres. Right now it's 0-0 in the top of the third. But Tommy Pham is not in the lineup for the Cardinals. And today is the final day for a team to waive a player, for that player to be claimed and be eligible for the postseason if they are to make it on the team with the team that claims them. So, i.e., if Tommy Pham were to be waived, which he's been vocal about being a part of a playoff team, and he's kind of been used in a platoon role. If Tommy Pham wants to be a part of a playoff team, he has to be waived today. Do you believe he is a part of the Cardinals after today, T-Bone?
Oh, man. I think you're going to see them place him on waivers today is what my gut tells me. And especially if they lose today, and to me, one game shouldn't matter. If they lose today, they've dropped 3-4 to San Diego. And I think at that point, the front office, the coaching staff, I think the coaching staff and the front office kind of accepted this already. They've got like a 1% chance to be a playoff team. I think that's what their current odds are on FanGraphs.
Luka Baker's back hitting cleanup for you. So.
Yeah, so I think they know. And I think they'll do Tommy Pham right. You know what? Again,
it's good for Tommy to give him a shot at a playoff spot.
Yeah, and again, I have no issue with the way they operate at the trade deadline. They were in a playoff spot when they made those trades. They didn't give up anything of significant value. You know, they traded away Tommy Edman, who's making $10 million, and they hadn't played a game all season for him. They traded away a distressed asset in Dylan Carlson. Now, if you want to have an upset of how they handled Carlson throughout his timeline here, that's one different argument. But I think they will probably place him on waivers. I would be shocked if he goes to New York. Maybe he goes to one game in the Yankees series, because if you put a player on waivers, they can technically still play for you. But you probably don't want to do that just so he doesn't get hurt, and then you're stuck with him. So my guess is tonight after the game, we'll see reports come out that Tommy Pham's been placed on waivers, and then I think it's like 48 hours or something, 24 hours. I wouldn't be shocked if he's playing on a different team by the time we get to this weekend.
Yeah, I think the writing was kind of on the wall with him not being in the lineup today, and I understand it was a righty on the mound. He doesn't play against that. I just feel like the Cardinals realize where they're at and where Tommy Pham wants to be, and it's not going to happen in St. Louis this season. The real question is who he gets claimed by. I could see the Braves picking him up. I could see the Kansas City Royals picking him up. Like, Tommy Pham will be an asset. He's had success in the playoffs in past years with teams that made it to the postseason. It's just not going to be with the Cardinals this year, and I'm kind of with T-Bone. I think they did the right method. They did the right move. It just didn't work out with Tommy Pham. And honestly, he didn't have the success he thought he was going to have beyond those first two appearances that he made once he was traded to the Cardinals. Hey, don't forget, we have the second annual Blues and Brews on Friday night, September 20th at the Anheuser-Busch Brewery. You can get fired up for the Blues season at this outdoor street party. It's featuring live music from country music star Matt Stell and St. Louis's own Charles Glenn's music group. Plus, there will be appearances by Braden Shen, Jake Neighbors, Dylan Holloway, Philip Broberg, Drew Bannister, and tons of Blues alumni. Tickets are just $20, and they're on sale now. Learn more at 101ESPN.com. Graham Francis doing a great job filling in for us today. For Grant T-Bone, I'm Alex Ferrario. We will talk to you tomorrow from 11 to 2. Fastlane coming up next here on 101 ESPN.